We didn't have to do that hard cutoff, but because I had been made fun of for 2 years for having a debate intro song, which had a hard cutoff for no good reason at all, I figured we would just, leave it included. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rob. It's all yours,
Finally,
buddy.
someone with sense gets to talk here, so this will be nice. Welcome to the Crucible, everyone, the premier debate channel online right now. We got a good one for you tonight. We have Andrew Wilson from the Crucible. We'll be debating Dave Smith, who, for me, most famous this week for shattering Andrew Cuomo's dreams. And
good job, by the way, Dave.
Good job. If you have not seen it, it's a banger. It's an all-timer. Please check that out. I'm excited. Fans of both of these guys think it's going to be a fantastic debate. They're going to be going on libertarianism. Is it better than Christian populism? I think there's going to be a lot to say. Some agreements, but who likes those? Let's get to disagreements. I think it'll be great. They're going to have 7-minute openings, which will start with Andrew, and then we'll go into about an hour and 15 minutes of general discussion, followed by some closings. It'll be 7 minutes, and then we're going to get to questions from the audience. So any super chat you put in, we'll try to get to all of those. And then please be watching the moderators in the chat. They're going to give you instructions on how you could call in. So look for the chat, the moderators that'll be talking about that. And we plan on taking a hefty amount of call-in. So it's going to be a good one. You want to get involved in this, ask either guy a question, make fun of them. We all have thick skin. Just don't make fun of the moderator, I guess. He's perfect. You can't make fun of him. But other than that, looking forward to it. Why don't we just jump in? I don't think either of you really need that much of an introduction. So Andrew is the challenger. You get to go first. You have up to 7 minutes for your opening statement whenever you're ready.
Sure. You guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dave, for coming into tonight's debate. I appreciate it. I want to let you know the reason I'm having this debate with you is because I think I can bring you to the dark side of the force, and you're already halfway there. My hope is to convince you to get to the rest of the way there. Libertarianism is, in the end, a system which inevitably leads to degeneracy. The reason libertarians currently have a Skittles nominee for president is because the very ideology itself is corrupt. It starts with the very core idea on which all other ideas are based, which is self-ownership. I know this is a doctrine that Mr. Smith does believe because I have seen him reference it multiple times in multiple appearances, most recently on Reason TV in his case against open borders. It's a failing dogma because it opens up the ultimate can of worms. If people really do own themselves, then we really can't engage with any voluntary actions they take with each other and stop them, overrule them, or force them not to do those actions. This is exactly why Skittles in society exists. By this logic, we can't outlaw incest, prostitution. We can't outlaw gay marriage. We can't outlaw polygamy. We can't even outlaw unaliving yourself. All things which Christian ethics point to as absolutely immoral. Dave can't really say that they are, though. They have to be allowed if you own yourself, or it would be a violation of the self-ownership doctrine. It's nice and all that Mr. Smith has distanced himself from the failure that is the modern Libertarian Party, and I applaud him for doing it, but ultimately, the very reason he had to is because of this reason. It always leads to the absurd outcome of mass degeneracy. It has to. There's no way around it. Dave assumes, for reasons I don't understand, that his solution of non-promotion yet legalization somehow better than the alternative of the state utilizing authority to remove these moral plagues. I want the state busting up prostitution rings and pimps. I want them arresting incest practitioners, and I want them to arrest polygamists. I want them to use force to prevent unaliving of oneself. The anarcho-capitalist, in this case Dave, can't justify the state really doing any of those things. The Christian ethicist can, striking a key balance between what he would call totalitarianism and what are considered freedoms. For us, though, Mr. Smith has outlined a plan, one he often repeats. His plan is to have libertarians move into positions of governance in order to take control of key systems and then abolish them eventually in hopes that we eventually get to some kind of anarcho-capitalist society over time. He says this because, quote, the perfect is the enemy of the good. This means, of course, that because a thing isn't perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't move to what's better, even if what's better isn't perfect. so that the audience knows this is also the exact plan of socialists. They also want to seize government institutions, abolishing power over time in order to end up with a stateless society, just like Dave wants. It's amusing to note that ultimately what both sides are really fighting over is the power of the state and the use of its force. It's hilarious to me that Christians have fallen for any libertarian dogma at all. We have every right to rule as much as the secularists, and the right to wield state power how we see fit to exercise our will, just as the libertarian Mr. Smith wants to do himself, and as the socialists want to do. Mr. Smith definitely can't argue we shouldn't, as if traditional Christians were in power, society would certainly be better than it is now. And, well, if it's not perfect, well, perfection is the enemy of the good. Christian ethics is a superior system of justification, starting points, which reject libertarian axioms, including that of self-ownership, on which the non-aggression principle must base itself. I'd like to see Dave demonstrate for us that self-ownership is true. I'm willing to be convinced, but thus far I most certainly am not. I'd like him to finally clarify his oughts and if incest ought be allowed, if it isn't reproductive, if homosexual marriage ought be allowed, if polygamous marriages ought be allowed, and if unaliving yourself ought be allowed. Anytime in the past I have seen Dave pushed on these ought claims, he's somewhat evasive and dodgy. And I think it's time to get clear positions and note what he actually does want in society, not as preferences go, but as his ought of self-ownership demand people be allowed to do. With no evasion, tell us what is true, that you do believe prostitutes ought to be able to be prostitutes if they want, that those who want to unalive ought be able to do that, that polygamists ought be able to marry as many people as they want, that Skittles people ought be able to get married, that drug use ought to be legal regardless of the drug. I'd like to get into these distinct philosophies. I think that's enough for us to start with. And with that, I'll yield my time to Dave.
Okay. All right, Dave, whenever you're ready, go ahead. You got up to 7 minutes.
Sure. So as I said, I'll make my opening a bit of a response to yours because I'm just meeting you guys tonight and I didn't exactly know what I was in for. But I will say that I know, Andrew, I have seen on Twitter, you in your bio, you refer to yourself as a paleoconservative. And that I would just say, sorry, were you going to say something? Oh, no, sorry. I would just say that I'm very interested in the re-energizing of that term and that there are people who consider themselves paleoconservatives today. I'm a big, let's just say I was very influenced and I've read a lot of paleoconservative thinkers, Paul Gottfried, Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, guys like this. One of the things that I think was great about all of those guys was that they all, the term paleoconservative actually came from hearkening back to the old right, which were a group of anti-statist right-wingers back who were, you know, fighting the New Deal and fighting keeping America out of World War I and out of World War II. I would just say in response to some of the things you said there, the idea of libertarianism and self-ownership does not at all imply that anyone is allowed to do whatever they want to do. And it certainly doesn't imply that you can't say something is horrifically immoral, even if it doesn't violate the principle of self-ownership. Certainly property rights would be a great example of where someone wouldn't be allowed to do whatever they want to do if they were on someone else's property who didn't wish to allow them to do that. I think that a lot of the later stuff we probably have to get into in the back and forth and when we're asking each other questions. I think there are lots of examples of degeneracy that you could bring up and ask whether I think we ought to be allowed to do them or not. The question to me isn't so much whether we ought to be allowed to do them, it's how society ought to treat them and what exactly has led us to the point where these awful things are so celebrated. So I'm sure there'll be more time to get into all of these things, but I would just say that I think from what I'm hearing at the beginning here, there's a big misunderstanding of what exactly it is I stand for and also what kind of the tradition of resisting centralized authoritarian control is really all about. But I'm happy to talk more about this.
All right. opening statements done. So I'm going to try to stay out of it as much as possible. We'll let you two go back and forth. You only hear from me if the audience can't hear because there's too much talking over each other. Other than that, we've got about an hour, 15 hour, 20 minutes. You guys go ahead.
Dave, can you demonstrate for us how you own yourself?
Well, what exactly do you mean by that?
Do you own yourself?
Yes.
Can you demonstrate that?
I mean, I'm demonstrating. We're both demonstrating it right now on this show.
Well, you're not demonstrating that you own yourself.
What do you mean by own?
Well, I think that ownership of a thing is just a social construction. That ownership itself is just a parameter of agreed upon criteria.
Okay, but if you
hang on, let me finish the point.
Sure.
For which, so that's how we know. So I own that guitar because we agree that I own that guitar. That's it. That's the only reason I own it. I don't think that there's anything which is that you can point to that would demonstrate that this exists outside of a social construction we agree to.
Okay. Well, I'm missing your point here.
My point is that I think it's a social construction when you say that you own yourself. I don't think that
I didn't say it's not a social construction.
Well, then you don't own yourself?
That's a false binary. I'm not. Hold on one second.
Listen, no. That's a law of logic. You either do or you don't.
No, I didn't say. No, you're asking me if I do or I don't. Do you own that guitar?
Yeah.
Okay, but you just said it's a social construct.
Yeah, but I gave you the criteria for the social construct would be an agreement of.
And I said I own myself.
Right, but when you say...
So as much as you own that guitar, you've proved
This is
nothing.
incorrect. When I say, do you own yourself? And you say, I'm not sure. Law of logic would...
No.
Hang on, let me finish.
I said yes.
Yeah, the law of excluded middle is going to show this. It can only be yes or no. Do you have self-ownership? Yes or no. I own the guitar because we agree we do. Do you only own yourself because we agree you do?
Well, I don't agree that that's what ownership means, but you said yes and I said yes. So we're both exactly even.
Well, then I want to know then I want to know how you own yourself.
Well, look, if you actually look up ownership in like a dictionary, I think the definition that you gave would be a little bit different than that. So do I exercise my control over myself? Do I do so morally? Yes, I think so. And I actually think that in order for us to even have this conversation, we both have, in a sense, agreed to that principle.
I don't think we have.
It's me versus you.
How have we
Do you
agreed?
own the arguments that you're making so far in this conversation?
You don't. How do you own an argument?
No, I mean, when I say that, I mean, is it yours?
It came out of my mouth, sure.
Are the words you're saying yours?
But how would that make
mine?
the application that I own that thing?
Well, look, again, define own.
I think that the definition of ownership would be a social construct in which you and I, via agreement criteria, decide that X thing becomes property which is assigned to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So if that's true,
by that definition, do you own yourself?
I would say by the definition of that social construction, I could say that you own yourself. Sure.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't mean anything. Let me explain why.
Okay,
because if the
what did we just do this whole time?
Let me explain. Because if the social construction, what if we change the social construct and we decide that you can own a person, Dave?
Right. Okay. And what if we change the social construct and says I own your guitar and I own you?
That's exactly right. What if we change the social construction of ownership to mean you can own a person? Does that mean that people no longer own themselves?
Well, the difference here, right, is that, and it's the word that I mentioned that you didn't, is that I would say that ownership would imply that you're justified in that claim.
How are you justified in that claim?
How am I justified in the claim of owning myself?
Yeah, you just said if you agreed it's a social construction. So if we agree that it's a social construction, then we can own other people as via social construction. So that would be justified.
Well, I don't think so. So the major difference there, right, is that as we're having this conversation, and clearly what's the goal here? To persuade, probably not to persuade each other, but at least to persuade the audience who's listening to us, because we recognize that they are in control. Forget the word own, because that's triggering, evidently, but they are
I'm not triggered by the word own.
Okay. When I say triggering, meaning that's going to start a whole nother debate about semantics. So
Yeah, but semantics are important in a debate.
Okay, well, all right. Let's not do this tactic of interrupting every 2 seconds. So let me just finish my point here. So we are both presuming that the people who are listening to this are in control of their own thoughts, and we could potentially persuade them toward our cause. And so if we're doing all of this, we kind of are recognizing in some sense that it's more valuable to persuade people than it is to, I don't know, just enforce our will on them. And so in that sense, I would say that, yes, there is some kind of norm that there's a justifiable path where you can persuade people versus force them.
Sure. Well, I agree that you can persuade all sorts of people and that can be part of a societal norm and that everybody can agree that that's part of a societal norm. Right. That does not demonstrate that you own yourself. Thus, the key principle for the non-aggression principle, which is self-ownership, that's where the violation comes in. Do people own themselves? Is that a justified position or isn't it?
I'm saying that, yes, I think it is. But again,
then can you demonstrate it?
Well, what would you mean by that? What would it mean to demonstrate that you own yourself?
You would have to prove that you own yourself.
That I can control myself, or what? Again, just be clear about what you're asking.
Well, here, let me give you an example. Yeah, I'll give you an example to the contrary. I have seen throughout all of human history that human beings seem to be able to own other human beings without much problem. That doesn't seem to be a problem. As long as the social construction of ownership of the time states that you can own another person, you seem to be able to just fine.
Right.
So this axiom of self-ownership is not obvious to me. To be an axiom, it has to be self-apparent and self-obvious.
So what demonstrated that people owned other people throughout time? Prove that to me. The same way you just said to me, prove to me that I own myself.
But I did.
No. Hold on.
I'll prove it to you again.
Well, hold on. Let's try to not. We're only a couple minutes.
You interrupted me. I didn't interrupt you.
Well, hold on. You just asked me to prove that I own myself, and then you asserted that throughout history people owned other people. So prove that.
Yeah, but we already did, and let me explain how. You and I already agreed that ownership is a social construction. And that throughout history, the social construction had changed where people were able to own other people via the social construct. So whatever the social construct is of the day, that's all it is. As long as you agree that ownership is a social construction, you basically have to bite that bullet, right?
Wait, no, I'm not even understanding what you're saying here. So we agreed it was a social construct. And then your next statement after that was, prove to me that you own yourself.
Yeah, a social construction doesn't exist in objective reality.
Right.
It's a term.
Prove to me that anyone ever owned someone else throughout history. And all you said was it was a social construct as well.
You mean like a contract of ownership between slaves or something?
No, it's your question. So you tell me how.
Yeah, my claim is that ownership is a social construction. Do you agree or disagree with that claim?
I think it is a social construct, but there also can be ethical and non-ethical or moral and immoral.
Well, then if you make the assertion that it's anything more than a social construction, then the burden of claim is on you to demonstrate how it could be.
Well, okay. I mean, again, you're dodging my question here. I asked you the same question you asked me, and you weren't able to answer it either.
I did answer it.
By the way, part of the reason why I asked is because I don't exactly understand the question you're asking me. Are you asking me to say why I think, how I could prove that it is moral that one person should own themselves rather than someone else own them? Is that
that's not the question. So here's the question. Let me explain it to you.
Okay.
The non-aggression principle itself revolves around the idea that human beings own themselves, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the thing is that you and I can agree that there's been tons and tons of slavery throughout human history, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those people clearly own these other people. So this has to be a social construction of agreement is what is ownership. We agree that you own it, therefore you own it. What I'm asking for is some type of justified evidence that is not the case and that there is some moral ought or some type of demonstration philosophically or otherwise that a human being actually owns themselves.
Okay, so just to be clear here, if I were to say, if you're saying ownership meaning just strictly control over who has something, then yes, there have been lots of times where people can come just take all your stuff and then claim they own it. And if you're saying the law recognizes it or the society recognizes it, then essentially they own it. So
they can do that with people too, right?
Right. And in a sense, I agree with you. And that
so then you don't own yourself.
Okay. Let me just finish what I'm saying.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I mean, dude, we got a long show here, so let's just let each other talk. So in a sense, I agree with you. Yes, you can take possession of something. I don't think anybody is arguing that, and I don't think it's a very impressive point to make that, yes, people can take possession of something, and that could be codified by law or society. What we're talking about is something slightly different, which is justified ownership over something. So then the claim is like whether it's morally right that you own this or not. Fair enough. And I'm sure there's lots
I'm just
of
looking
areas,
for the demonstration
sure
of what is morally right. Sure.
Sure. Well, okay. If you're looking for the demonstration of what is morally right, I'm sure there's lots of areas where you would believe something is morally right and something else is wrong. And the demonstration of it would be what? That this is what you believe. This is what seems to be right and wrong. This is what has been accepted. And
no, my justification would be divine command, not seemings or phenomenal conservatism.
Okay,
which is what seemings are.
So okay, but so divine command. So what? And how would you exactly determine what is and isn't divine command?
Well, let's assume for a second that I was, I don't know, like delirious, right? And just thought I talked to God, and He gave me commands, right? If it's just preference, if we're just going off of preference, just things which Dave prefers are true, and Dave just prefers that you own yourself because he does, then any preference that I came up with in this delirious state where God was speaking directly to me would be just as valid as whatever preference that you just axiomatically come to because you just want them to be true. My claim here is that libertarianism at its foundation, at its fundamental foundation, is flawed because this axiom of self-ownership isn't actually true, but rather a social construction which is asserted as though it is a truism when it clearly is not. So it's a fundamental flaw. The reason that you guys come up with such absurd conclusions like that prostitution ought to be legal and all these other things is, and by the way, Dave, you have to end up with that. Otherwise, people don't own themselves. Do you think the state should come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself, for instance? Do you think that they should do that?
Well, all right. Stick with your point that you were making at first, because you're just jumping all around here.
Well, no,
what was the first thing you were saying?
Well, I already
there?
gave you the point. I'm saying I reject your axiom. I reject the axiom of self-ownership until otherwise demonstrated. That's my point.
Okay, so what would you, so you're saying that if I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the first part that you're saying here because I'm not getting it at all. So you're saying if somebody hallucinated that something was right and wrong and it was horrifically not right and wrong, that somehow that disproves the idea that anything is right or wrong?
If it's only axiomatic and based on preference, it would be just as valid. So how do you
determine if anything is morally right or wrong?
If it's from a preference base, you couldn't.
Okay, so how do you determine that anything is morally right or wrong?
I do it from divine command. You do it from preference. I'm meeting you where you're at.
No, you do it from divine command. What does that mean? Explain that.
So this means that I follow Christian ethics. I use transcendental categories inside of philosophy to create justifications for the values which come from God's laws. That's what I do.
That's a lot of words to not say anything. How do you determine?
Do you know what transcendental? Do you know what transcendental categories are?
I don't understand the words.
It sounds like you don't understand.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm really stupid. I don't understand any of the words. So explain it to me. How do you determine if something is right and wrong?
Okay, so what I would do to make these determinations is we start with objective versus subjective. Is it a subjective value or is it an objective value? If we start with it just being a subjective value, then who cares? We never need to go any further than that. We just never need to go any further for justification. So what I've determined is that your values here in libertarianism are subjective value based. Therefore, there's never a reason for me to justify anything objectively to you because any subjective preference I have is just as valid.
You're not answering my question at
literally,
all.
That's the most precise answer you could ever get.
Andrew,
if you're
how do you determine if something is right or wrong?
Divine command.
And then I asked you what that means, and you said
I just
nothing.
Explained.
No, you didn't. You just said that you think my basis is
okay. Fine, Dave. I'll make it super simple because God tells me so. Is that better for you?
Sure. No,
Okay.
if that's the answer. That's
the answer.
Okay.
God tells me
God
so.
tells you,
Yeah.
like, and through what means does God tell you this?
He directly communicates right into my brain. He's like, that shit's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, but okay. So, okay. So, just to be clear, the point of that is that, Andrew, it sounds very good when you attack someone and say that's subjective, but when your response to that is God communicates directly into my brain, that also, I mean, I don't know what the word is for that.
Subjective.
But
It would be subjective.
would probably be the word.
But that's my whole point. That's how I'm granting your entire argument. It's like, it doesn't matter ultimately.
Okay,
objectively.
but your counter is also subjective. So
right. So then that means that my preference is no worse than your own preference.
Well, I mean, no, it means by your argument, we're even.
Yeah. If I'm using preference-based, if I'm using preference-based arguments, or I'm sorry, preference-based morality, and you're using preference-based morality,
listen,
then we're equal, Dave.
To be clear, I don't think I am using preference-based morality.
Got it. So can you make justification then?
1 second. Let me try to finish the sentence here. I don't think I am making subjective-based morality, but you accused me of that. And so my response to you is, so what's your objective base? And your response is, God talks to me directly into my head.
Yeah, for the purpose of demonstration.
All right. By the way, God also talks to me in my head. And so,
perfect.
All right, fine. Like,
yeah.
All right.
So if God talks,
by your own standard,
there you go.
You haven't won anything. By your own standard, we're even.
It's not here to win it. It's here to demonstrate it, Dave.
I want to try to let's try if we can, because we're only a few minutes into this. Let's try. This got more contentious than I thought it would in the first few minutes. Let's try to just, by the way, because I want to have a good conversation with you. And I've been told by people who I love and trust that you were a guy to have a good conversation with.
Yeah, but you keep on evading every question that I have for you.
Oh, all right. I don't think I have, but
so
okay.
let's answer.
Ask me a direct question.
Great.
I'm happy to answer.
Should the state come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself or not, Dave?
I would want them to. Yes.
Yes. Would you want the state to stop a man from having sex with his sister if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Christ. Wait, if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Yeah, she has no uterus.
But that was supposed to be worse than if it would reproduce?
Yeah, it would be worse. It would be less worse.
I'm just saying that seemed like an unnecessary caveat to throw on there. But okay. Wait, Jesus Christ. What you're talking about, like adults or children?
Adults.
Okay, fine. Because for children, obviously, that'd be yeah, I guess I would want them to.
Okay. So you want the state to utilize authority.
Well, not just the state. I would want anyone.
Okay. So I don't understand.
Anyone with the force to do it, or anyone with the strength to do it. Sure.
So then those people don't own themselves.
No, I don't think that's the conclusion.
Well, if they own themselves, can you demonstrate what they're doing wrong?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
But that's a very silly and very look, this is a very like childish interpretation of libertarianism.
You're still not answering the question. You're just prattling.
No. I didn't. I immediately answered the question, and now I'm responding to the point you made. So I immediately said, yes, anyone with the authority to do it, please stop, or the power to do it, please stop. And then I was responding to what you said. So I did answer the question. What I'm saying is that the idea that if you own yourself, and this is the fundamental mistake that you made at the beginning, therefore I can't say anything is immoral, is ridiculous. And not only in the libertarian worldview, but in any worldview, there are lots of things, and I'm sure in yours, where there could be things that you don't think are illegal, but you still, or you don't think should be illegal, but you still think are wrong. So that doesn't mean anything. If I think people own themselves, I can't think there's something horribly wrong about this.
That's not the point. So I'll explain again.
Okay, sure. So please.
If you want the state to go in, if a brother is banging his sister and she can't reproduce, I don't know how you could demonstrate.
Why does reproducing matter in this?
I'll explain sure. Why, so that you can't bank on reproduction as being a harm, because it could have like some kid who's all fucked up. So I'm just taking that out of the equation.
Okay. I gotcha.
I'm just taking that out of the equation, right? She has no uterus. They can't reproduce, or maybe they're homosexuals, right? And they're just related. If they own themselves and they're adults, that is exactly what you would make the argument for gay marriage. They're adults. These adults are consenting with each other. Can you actually justify why that's wrong?
Sure.
Then justify why it's wrong.
Well, I can justify why it's wrong. Okay, there's two separate questions here. And this is almost like, I think what you need to pick apart. So, look, there's two questions. One is, could I justify someone using force to stop them? And then could I justify why it's wrong? You get where those are two different things?
Yeah, I'm just asking why it's wrong.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so let's do that.
Okay. Do you get why those are two different things, though? You get the point I'm making?
Yeah, sure. So can you answer the question now?
Yeah, dude. Listen, man. Do you want to like have a decent back and forth here, or like, do you want to not?
You're still not answering the question.
Okay.
Can you justify why it's actually wrong for two consenting adults?
Yeah. See, the thing is, I am answering the question. You're just kind of being a dick and trying to win the debate.
When are you going to answer the question, Dave?
See,
all right, give him a chance, Andrew.
so is that actually, like, does anyone listening to this think this makes for like good debate tactics? No, you actually are not like recognizing that there's a difference between these two things. So
I just told you I do.
Let's leave him finish.
All right, do you guys want to do this, man? I fucking like honestly, dude. This
You've
is just
talked. We've talked way more than I have, Dave. I just want you to answer my question. Can you justify it or not, bro?
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I'll go back to saying, do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to like do a show here, or like what's the point of this?
You wanted? I asked you specifically if you wanted a conversation or a debate. You said a debate. We're debating.
No. I didn't say that. I said we could do whatever you want to do, dude.
Yeah. So we're doing a debate. So let's not do a meta conversation. Just to answer the question.
A debate doesn't mean you talk over me every time I try to answer.
I just want you to answer the question.
No. I understand you do, and I was, but
Dave,
you're just kind of.
Here's what we're gonna do.
Sure.
Dave can expound here on what he thinks is occurring here in this debate, and then before you come back in, Andrew, we'll give Dave a chance to specifically answer the question that you've asked. So Dave's gonna do two things here.
Ask me the question again. I'm sorry.
Can you justify why two consenting adults who are brother and sister having sex is morally wrong?
Yes.
Then do it.
Okay, because I think it's for the same reason you would think. I think it's against nature. It's evil. It just seems horrible. I don't know. Do you have a better answer for why it's wrong?
Well, yes. Divine command.
Divine command. Okay, fine. So I also say divine command. That's why it's wrong.
Well, but then the axiom of self-ownership would be wrong.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. And if you had listened to me when I was responding the first time, you would understand.
Well, here, let me now make my argument back. Yeah, if they don't own themselves, right? Or if they do own themselves, rather, and they're two consenting adults, just like two homosexuals consenting adults, why is it actually wrong for them to do that? You say because it seems like it's against nature, which is the natural fallacy. Couldn't I just apply that to homosexuals as well and say, well, it seems like it's against nature?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you could.
And do you think so? Your moral oughts are based around just things that gross you out?
No, divine intervention, bro.
Divine command?
Yeah, there you go.
So if it's divine command, then you're going to abandon libertarianism and you're going to come over to Christian ethics, right?
No.
But I thought you made your justification based on divine command.
So, okay, listen, it's clear that
great point, dude. You're right. You have divine command, and you're asking me why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Listen, dude, I know, like, I don't know anything about you. I don't know why Jacob thought this was going to be a good idea. I know you like dominate 20-year-old like OnlyFans sluts in debates.
I also dominate 45-year-old comedians in debates. What's your point?
41, motherfucker. And listen, and no, you're really not though. You're asking questions about why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Oh, okay. I don't know. Because I think it's wrong and yes, awful. And also, do I think that the government, if we're talking about adults, is it being outlawed going to be a great way to regulate that? Probably not. What even is your like vision? I mean, this is like the dumbest fucking question to get into like what the role of government ought to be. Yes, you're right. If the FBI is breaking in and stopping 25-year-old and 28-year-old brothers and sisters from having sex with each other, that's okay. But
they do that. Just so you know, they do that right now. Are you opposed to it? They actually arrest people for doing this and they drag them off to jail. and they put them
Sure.
in jail for
I'm
doing
not-
that.
I'm not nearly as aware of this as you are, Andrew, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to fight against that law.
Yeah, but
Sure.
here's the thing then. What I don't understand is that if the argument for self-ownership is that consenting adults can do whatever it is they want to do, because they're consenting adults are not hurting anybody else, this would be a violation of the non-aggression principle. Why couldn't a brother and a sister engage in this in Dave's libertarian land? Why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they be able to, honestly?
Sure. Well, why shouldn't they do it is for moral reasons. I suppose you could make an argument that if people really do have freedom, then a grown, grown adults who are related should not be banned by law and should not have a cop bash him over the head with a baton for like having sex with a cousin or something. Okay, but you're taking this to like this weird extreme example where
That happens now?
Oh, sure. Okay. Anyway, so you're taking this to a weird extreme example where, okay, let's take it to the other extreme and say, do you believe that the government should rush into your house anytime you're doing anything where they determine that that's degenerate or not moral or productive? You're smoking a cigarette right now. Is that enough of a reason for someone to come get you? Like, would there be any realm where you would say, maybe the government shouldn't be regulating every inch of what I determine from divine, whatever that is moral or immoral?
Yeah, so actually this makes my point for me. This is great. So the reason that I just go ahead and concede a lot of these points, because there's no real reason to fight them. For instance, if you agree with me that the only justification that you can have is that, well, because God told you it's gross, and so therefore you ought to not do it, then this would mean that you agree with me in divine command and should be a Christian ethicist. That's why that's done. That's why I just make it super easy for you to go ahead and agree. And you did. You agreed. Absent. So I'm just going to ask this straight out. Okay. And no, I don't believe in that sort of government overreach. And I can give you my systems and reasons for why that is too under Christian ethics, or Christian ethics, where we both take into account consequence, but also take into account duty. So I'm going to ask this: absent any kind of divine command, God didn't tell you anything, would you say that it's not moral? And can you justify why it's not moral for a brother to hump his sister? Could you do that absent divine command? Like, honest question, Dave. This is super important.
Sure. So I would say this, right? I grew up an atheist. Well, I mean, I'm Jewish, but I grew up like not a religious person. It was just, kind of what I was born into. And I was pretty much an atheist for most of my life. And then I had some experiences as I became a young adult that made me think about God and kind of get in touch with him. And then it was really when I had my first child that I really found God. So I would agree with you that, yes, there is something from God that instructs me as to what is right and wrong in this world.
Sure.
However, but before I ever believed in God, yeah, there was just a deep feeling inside of me that would have been very wrong. And I do believe that was always from God. So
okay,
I don't know.
Then absent God,
what that proves.
So then absent God,
proves nothing in this argument.
Yeah, no, it does though, and I'm
Doesn't.
going to explain how. I'm going to explain
Go
how,
ahead.
because you're saying that absent God is just your preferences. It's just how you feel.
No,
that's what makes
not
what's
what I
moral
said.
or not
No,
moral.
but
Then
see,
what would
that's
make
not-
it immoral
See, that's
absent
not-
God?
See, here's the thing, dude, Andrew. I think you're doing a thing here that a lot of like internet blood sport debaters try to do, which is that you're trying to win before you're actually listening to what I'm saying.
I can
So it's
steel
like,
man the entire thing if you'd like.
Try to listen to what I actually said and grapple with that. What I said was not before I believed in God, it was just subjective. What I said was before I believed in God, I always had this feeling, and what I believe is that was always God.
So to steel man,
that's a very different thing than what you said. All right.
Sure. So I'll just steel man the position. The position, to make sure I don't get this wrong at all, is that you believe that there was some type of natural law given to you by God before you ever even believed in God, correct?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Great. So I steel man the position. So to my question, which you didn't actually answer,
Sure.
which is this: absent God, if there was no God, could you justify why this would be immoral or not?
Yeah, I don't know that you could. I mean,
Yeah.
I think absent God, it's very difficult to arrive at morality.
Right. So absent God, so you're a divine command as well, divine command theorist, just like myself. So
Sure.
if that's true and you're a divine command theorist, and we have now shown how self-ownership leads to absurd conclusions like a brother being able to hump their sister.
No, but I disagree with it. Okay.
Well, okay, why can't, if you own yourself, why can't you hump your sister if she owns herself, Dave? That makes no sense.
What do you mean by why can't you? Why can't, if you don't own yourself, why can't you hump your sister? What does that mean?
Good question. But my point is with the non-aggression principle, the entire axiom.
You're not asking anything, dude.
Yeah, I am.
So let's just say this. And man, I wish you had picked an example that wasn't so fucking uncomfortable to talk about. But here, you, Andrew, don't own yourself. Mm-hmm. Why can't you just hump your sister?
You could.
Exactly. So what the hell are you asking? What's the question?
But that goes to my point. I think that if you actually have self-ownership as something more than an axiom, meaning it's justified somehow that you actually do own yourself, it's not just a social construction, then you wouldn't be able to hump your sister if you did not own yourself, right?
What do you mean wouldn't be able to?
But if you do own yourself, you can still hump your sister. The point being,
Andrew,
yeah,
do you own yourself?
Under the current paradigm of the social construction, we would say yes.
Okay, but so if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to hump yourself. I don't get. No,
you
point.
Still could, but that is the point.
So that's it. So you still could. So what are you saying?
So let me try again. Just listen to what I'm saying, like I just did yours. In fact, maybe you can steelman this for me.
Okay,
maybe like I just did for you.
Let me listen, and I'll see if I can.
So my point is that self-ownership is why you should not be allowed to aggress against another person, because they own themselves. Correct?
Okay.
Is that correct? Isn't that the basis of the NAP? You own you, I own me. That's why we cannot aggress against each other, correct?
Sure.
Okay, got it. And yet here we're both talking about using state authority to aggress against people who own themselves, who aren't actually doing anything you can justify as being wrong outside of Christian ethics. And so the thing is that seems to dispel the NAP. Now, can you steelman that back to me?
Okay,
I know.
So you're saying that if we own ourselves, and everybody and an act of aggression would be violating someone else's self-ownership, then it wouldn't be an act of aggression to kill yourself, incest amongst adults, things like this.
Right.
Okay. So
if that's true, and the only moral oughts that we have for why you shouldn't do this is through Christianity.
No, I didn't say. No, by the way, I didn't say Christianity, but you said that. But okay.
Okay, fine. God, whatever the justified axiom is for God, for divine command. Okay,
sure.
If that's the only way that we can justify that this is immoral, then the idea that you owning yourself and two consenting adults owning themselves in anarcho-capitalist land can't be true, because you are willing to use and violate their self-ownership with aggression because you think they're doing something morally wrong, but you can't justify what they're doing that's morally wrong.
No, okay, so again, this is back what I was trying to say before, that I think there's these two things that need to be separated. So there's the moral application of the initiation of violence, and then there's morality. And they're not exactly the same thing. And so if my neighbor, let's just say, my neighbor is not being a good husband and being a good father, okay, so like let's say he's just very cold with his children and doesn't pay the bills on time and doesn't work and is lazy and does all types of things that I judge to be morally wrong. Like I think he should be a better father and a better husband. But if I go over there and beat him over the head with a club to make him be a better husband and father, it's not as simple an equation as was he morally right or wrong? The question is it morally justified for me to enact this force against him in order to make, is that more moral or immoral than his initial sin? So that's the question that you get into when you start talking about government regulating a lot of these things. It's not as simple as you're making it out that, well, if people own themselves, then it has to be morally justified, whatever they do.
Okay, so let's see if we can't parse this out. And again, I'll see if I can't just steelman this with my criticism. So the thing is that I agree. We can look at scales, right? We can say that we can get to absurd conclusions if we were to say that there's no time or place to apply some sort of like aggression towards somebody, right? Otherwise, you would aggress on them for anything that you consider some kind of moral failure. And obviously, that's not what either of us are after.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that if we take it to its logical conclusion, libertarianism, which is what I said in my opening, as a consequence of itself, has to actually lead to degeneracy. And the reason is because of the idea here is that I own me and you own you. And if we consent to the two things we do together and it hurts nobody else, therefore not violating the non-aggression principle, which is the foundation for which this thing, revolves, then how can you make ever a claim against homosexuals getting married or against incest or against any of these things? How can you possibly make that claim? That's the ultimate question.
Okay, so a couple things here. I don't think that's the ultimate question, and I do think that I could make the claim against that in the same way that you could. And I think we already established this, right? That we can both make the claim for the exact same reasons because we believe in God and we believe in morality and we believe that this is immoral. So we both have the exact same ability to make the claim. But if we're talking about what your more, I think, broader point that you made there, that libertarianism leads to immorality, I think is completely wrong. And I think this is like kind of the most important fundamental miscalculation that a lot of people on the right who reject libertarianism make. The idea that, well, freedom and liberty is really what leads to degeneracy. And that's just not true. And in fact, empirically and logically, we can look at the situation, particularly the situation of the United States of America, and go, look, as the government has grown bigger and bigger, you've seen degeneracy get more and more out of control. And I understand why there is a movement against degeneracy. I understand we live in a moment right now where I think our society is essentially disintegrating. And I think that that's one of the things that, Andrew, you kind of are, I don't know, prominent for pointing out. The disintegration of values and norms all throughout.
But the reason I believe that those values and norms are being eroded is because of libertarians and social leftist elites who often will move towards this principle of non-aggression. They just do it in two different ways. The way one, which libertarian does it, is by saying, if I'm not violating you and your non-aggression principle in some way, then you really have no claim to tell me to do anything, and everything is affirmed through private property. The leftist just affirms it the opposite direction, says there's no such thing as private property, but they apply the same principle of, if I'm not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? And so as we dive into what is the non-aggression principle, the non-aggression principle is the principle that if you are not aggressing against somebody else and you own yourself, they cannot aggress against you. So via consent, you cannot utilize the state, Dave, to have them go and break up an incest family who is all consenting with each other and having orgies nightly. You can't do it.
I understand that's your perspective on this, but that has nothing to do with what I'm getting into. So actually what the non-aggression principle implies is that at best, government ought to be severely restricted, and at worst, government ought to not exist at all. Now, as we've had the rise in government, and I mean, look, in the United States of America, just in the last 20 years, in the last 20 plus years, which we could go back a lot further than that, you've had a tremendous growth in the size of government. And what happens as the government gets bigger and bigger is that all of the things that Christians and traditionalists tend to value get undermined. And so this institution of the government that is inherently based on violating the non-aggression principle does its absolute best to replace, take over, and monopolize all of the areas where traditionally family and community had domain. And
yeah,
so
but
I
why
think,
would that be problematic if the non-aggression principle logically should be ignored for these moral oughts? That's
well, hold on,
that is
but
the
that's
question.
well, hold on. That's a separate question. The point I'm making is that it's not an outgrowth of the non-aggression principle. It's an outgrowth of a rejection of the non-aggression principle. That's actually what leads to all
So
of this
then
stuff.
if we were to have the non-aggression principle with a shrunken government, are we still going to use the government in order to aggress against consenting adults who want to have incest or not?
Well, as long as a government exists, it will be used to aggress against non-consenting adults. And
Great.
So, yes,
Then
as I don't know.
yes.
Listen, Andrew, you're trying to obsess over this incest argument. Okay, laws
It's foundational.
Laws against incest. I'll grant you that. Sure, fine. Can we move on to any other topic now?
Yeah, but
Can we move on to talking about the state of the country as it actually exists?
Yeah, but this
it's
is
just
the
pretty
state of the
funny.
country as it
it's
actually
pretty-
exists.
Well, hold on. It's pretty funny because we live under the most powerful centralized government in the history of the world. The biggest organization in the history of the world is the United States of America's federal government in Washington, D.C., spending over $6 trillion a year, employing millions of people with the capability of overthrowing regimes all around the world. And instead, the argument we're getting here is, but if there was no government, who would stop an adult brother and sister from fucking? That's kind of goofy, man. It doesn't really have anything to do with
I just want to let you know
what
that
we're living
saying
through.
it's kind of goofy isn't an argument. You just said if we scale the government down to its umpteenth point of scale down, as long as there was still a government, you would want them to enforce action via violating the non-aggression principle for your preference. So if there was...
No, that's not what I said.
Well, it's Dave, it is. It's an entailment. If the government's really, really, really big and enforce it right now, and then you say, but if it was really, really small, we would still enforce that because you want to have those laws, then regardless of the size of government, the degeneracy is still going to exist, right? And it's still going to need to be enforced against regardless of the size of the government.
Wait, I'm sorry. Just can you rephrase the question? What is it exactly you're asking me?
I'm asking you, if we reach anarcho-utopia, we scale the government
I'm
down
not for a utopia, but
okay,
so
but
whatever.
if we reach anarcho whatever you want as the ultimate, right? The government is now scaled down to the point where it's essentially gone, right? Would you still want enforcement against this kind of thing? And how could you have enforcement against it without a government?
What against what kind of thing?
Like incest or gay marriage or any of these degenerate actions?
Okay, well, I think there's a pretty big gap between incest and gay marriage, but I will say that I think there's a gap between that.
What is it?
But I think they're two different things.
Yeah, they're two different things, but they're the same as far as two consenting adults doing what they want, right?
Yeah, me and you doing this debate are also two consenting adults doing what they want, but there's a gap between those things. So anyway,
what does that have to do? I mean, it logically tracks that if dude, you can't go on these long rambling diatribes, and I do 4 seconds. I do 4 seconds, and you go berserk. Just calm down. Let me ask the actual question.
Dude, come on, man. I asked you to clarify your question,
and I'm trying to clarify it so that you understand it.
But don't act like I'm going on these long rants and you're not talking. I mean,
well, you filibuster. You don't say that much, but I'm still willing to engage.
Oh, come on, Andrew.
I'm super concise. So I'm super concise.
Okay.
I'm going to get right to it, right, so that you understand what I'm saying to you. Okay. What I'm asking you is that the enforcement mechanism against this degeneracy, which you consider to be morally wrong, absent a state, are you still going to want an enforcement mechanism against these moral wrongs? You say, no, there's a big difference between incest and homosexual marriage or homosexual sex. However, the truth is that both of these things are exactly logically similar when it comes to two consenting adults doing what it is that they want when they want to do it without hurting anybody else. How's that not the case?
Well, again, as I just pointed out, we're also two consenting adults doing what we want without hurting anyone else. But I think that's very different. So I'm just saying that I'm not even saying I support either of those things. I'm saying I see them as different. No, the truth is that if we didn't have what we have today, and this is what happens with every very powerful centralized government, is that their biggest enemy becomes the family, the church, the community, because they don't like things that compete with them. If we actually got rid of all of the impediments between that, you would see an enormous return to normalcy in this country. You would see, I mean, look, starting even in the 1930s with Social Security, when you had the government take over the role of, we'll take care of old people when they get older. What you used to have was what? That parents would rely on their children to take care of them when they get older. Once you remove all of the disincentives toward normalcy and family and community, if the state was to be reduced to the size that you're talking about, no, my concern would not be, do we have federal agents with guns going in to break up incest amongst adults anytime it's happening? I don't even know how you would go about enforcing that.
What about people who just want to transition?
Again, the transitioning stuff is totally a statist product. This is something that's come out of the universities that are essentially government programs that has been perpetuated by the corporate media and Hollywood.
I'm not disputing any of that. Should they be allowed to do it though?
No. Well, that's
no.
Listen,
no.
Well, okay, hold on. Let me say this to be clear. Children, absolutely not. You should not be allowed to do that. Adults, a doctor should lose their license if they were ever to perform a surgery or something.
But it's voluntary.
Sure.
And they consented.
But a license could also be voluntary, and a medical board could also be voluntary. So what does that mean?
Well, so that's interesting that you bring that up, considering that the AMA was just a large corporate entity that was not government regulated. Did it get government money though? Started off as a trade organization, in fact, and what it did was it defamed all other types of medicine, and that was not the government doing that. That was a private institution which was doing that for the purpose Carnegie. Another private institution, Carnegie. The thing is that private institutions are just as susceptible to this type of overreach as the government is. Well, okay, now, hang on, let me finish. My turn.
Sure. Go ahead.
So as we dive into this, though, these medical licenses, why would you even need to have a medical license in an anarcho-capitalist system? You wouldn't even need to have one. And the voluntarism then of this man who wants to go in and have this elective surgery done, why would that be a problem? There's no medical licenses, Dave. It's anarcho-capitalism, baby.
Okay, so if you're going to say that the worst case scenario in anarcho-capitalism is that some random man could go in and someone would give him this surgery, okay, fine, I guess. I think that if you're asking why there would be licenses or why there would be voluntary organizations, because that's what human beings always naturally gravitate toward. But regardless of that, none of that is really the problem. The problem in our society is that this insane shit is being pushed on everyone, and it's being pushed by giant corporations who are connected to the government. It's being pushed by the government class, and most importantly, it's being pushed in the government schools. One of the things, and
it's also being pushed by private institutions and think tanks who go to lobbyists and influence the government.
Let me finish.
Let's leave Dave finish.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Right. So one of the things that I would say to people listening to this, because I hope you guys will kind of try to internalize this a little bit. Look, this whole shit, all of this insane degeneracy is being pushed by the most powerful people in this country. And it's not as if this just organically arose out of nowhere. And I hope you guys would at least consider the possibility that, look, the government always, by its nature, moves into the areas that were traditionally left for family and community and churches. and even something like educating the kids. This is one of the biggest problems that we have, that the government is in control of it. And why? And what would happen if they weren't? It would fall back into the realm of families and communities and churches. And what do you think would be better? What do you think would be better? This being run by Washington, D.C., or this being run by your local church? That's kind of the point I'm making. And if that means I have to sacrifice the FBI going on hunts for people having incest, I'm willing to make.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
trade.
these are almost great points, except that you forget like these institutions like the AMA and this type of thing, which started out, 150 years ago. The government came in, they used to come in with antitrust laws and break these things up. And under anarcho-America corporatism, these antitrust laws would not exist. These people would become.
Do you know anything?
Let me finish, Dave.
Okay, I apologize. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so anyway, over and over again, we see what happens when corporations also gain a huge leverage on power when it comes to no check on them from any government entity. This was, in fact, the entire point of Franco's Spain and why Mussolini came up with the idea of fascism to begin with, which was that the state needed to stop large trade organizations from swallowing up small trade organizations. That was the point.
All right.
Let me finish, man.
Sorry.
I thought
you were done.
They recognized that this was an important thing because what ends up happening is corporate power can also become elite and it becomes a government unto itself. Anarcho-capitalism is not going to stop that from happening. And on top of that, when we're talking about these moral oughts, these moral claims, there's not going to be medical licenses. There's no driver's licenses. There's none of these things which would protect you from this degeneracy, which your libertarian idealism leads us to every time. You can't even tell us why any of these things are wrong to do, Dave.
Okay. I already told you, and I have the exact same answer for what you have for why they're wrong. But listen, let me ask you this. Have you, because I know you call yourself a paleocon on Twitter. Are you familiar with like the paleoconservative thinkers? Like
Pat Buchanan's my favorite. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, for anyone listening here, read every Pat Buchanan book you can get your hands on. They're the absolute best. And Paul Gottfried too. You really should read him. He's just so good. And Sam Francis and all of these guys, dude. Go read them, and you will understand why this is just not right.
No, it's not, because Pat Buchanan would agree with me. He would say these moral oughts. He would say these moral oughts are going to require state enforcement no matter what. That's why he was a paleocon.
Okay, but what Pat Buchanan would not agree with you on is this idea that if there wasn't the government regulating these things, there'd be no reason for anyone to have licenses or something like that. That's just not true, dude. And
who would license them?
Listen. All of these guys, the Pat Buchanan, Paul Gottfried, all of these guys, Sam Francis, they all said that a huge part of their program was a drastic cut in the size and scope of government.
Because they didn't like the military-industrial complex.
No. Not just that. Yes, Andrew, believe me, I know this stuff, so I'm not wrong about this. Yes. They wanted a cut in the military-industrial complex, but not just that. They wanted to destroy the managerial state. That was their entire plan. Paul Gottfried said, and this was his view, which I thought was a perfect way to say it, which I think you should really consider, that he goes, I am strategically a radical libertarian. And he was very clear that he's not a libertarian because he believes in rights in the same sense that I do. Like he was saying, I don't believe in your right to live any degenerate lifestyle that you want to, but I'm strategically a radical libertarian because he recognized that the only way that you could ever return to normalcy, culturally speaking, was to get DC out of the mix. That the centralized federal government cannot be this in control of the way children are raised, the way people are educated, the way people get healthcare and education and housing without it totally perverting the natural
State
order.
And local governments are just as susceptible to these things, Dave, from lobbying and everything else. And you can't stop.
No, they're not.
You can't stop lobbying. And you can't stop people who have the will of saying, I own myself, from demanding that they be able to be represented, demanding that they be able to have lobbying, from demanding that they own themselves. They're consenting.
that has nothing to do with self-ownership, but okay. But
it clearly does, Dave.
Listen, I would highly recommend, instead of you just trying to win this point against me, go read what Paul Gottfried and Pat Buchanan had to say about this, because
I don't understand. Why can't you make their argument, Dave?
No. I can make their
argument. Then make it.
I'm saying, Andrew, you're already in the mode of not trying to hear a point I have to say.
I've heard everything you said, bro.
Fire back immediately to get the win.
Yeah, I don't agree with you, so I'm arguing with you. That's how that works.
Right. Okay, I'm saying that these guys who you call yourself a paleoconservative, the people who were the leading thinkers of paleoconservatism, made these points really well. I'm just trying to say, maybe go get it from a source where you'll actually be able to listen to it from.
I'm listening to it from you right now. I'm arguing with your points because I don't agree with your points. Okay. And when we get to these ought claims of what we ought to do, it seems like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're like, oh, I think doctors should have their medical licenses revoked for doing this bad thing. But if we really looking at what self-ownership would be in anarcho-capitalist land, there wouldn't be these licenses to begin with. I don't really understand why it is.
There could be plenty of licenses.
From who? Who would they be issued by?
Organizations, the same as they are now. What do you mean?
So the organization which issued the license would have some sort of authority and would be able to use force, right?
No, not necessarily, but they would be able to use their own version of, like, someone could be banned from their organization. Are you actually making the kind of like Bastiat thing where you can't separate government from society and that there can't be anything other than look, obviously all of the government involvement aside, but we all know that we were told a couple things not to say before we got on this show, right? Because of the YouTube government. There's lots of different.
Yeah, why would you have a problem with YouTube? That's a private organization doing what it wants, Dave.
What are you asking me now?
Why would you have a problem with YouTube? So that's a private organization doing what it wants.
You guys, by the way, can you guys see? This is what's frustrating to me. If you could see, I just made a point. It was an excellent point. And then you immediately just pivot to something else and move the goalpost. So anyway,
it was your point, Dave.
The point I was making was that there can be private organizations that can have their standards also. And then you pivoted to saying, do I support YouTube and what they do? In what context? What do you mean?
No, what you said was we had some TOS or things which would be TOS that we couldn't talk about on this private platform, but you must support private platforms existing because you're an anarcho-capitalist.
No,
so what's the problem? So you don't support private platforms existing?
Listen, man, do you support private restaurants existing?
Sure.
Okay, if they brought you, you ordered a T-bone steak and they brought it to you and it was freezing cold, would you support that because you support private restaurants existing?
No.
Exactly.
What does that have to do with anything?
It proves exactly.
But you believe that the restaurant should have the right. Wait, Dave. You believe
something existing doesn't mean you
that's super weird, Dave.
Do.
So you don't believe that restaurants should have the right to serve you a cold steak?
No, I do.
Well, then what are you talking about, Dave?
Did you honestly not get that?
I didn't honestly get that. No, it made no sense.
All right.
Well, listen. What Dave is
to you, dude.
What Dave is saying is, I don't support YouTube doing that. But what Andrew's saying, but do you support the right of a private organization to make their own choices? To which I believe Dave's answer is, yeah, they could make that choice, but I personally don't like that choice. I'm not in support of that choice. But I think Andrew, the point he's making is, yeah, but if you had an anarcho-capitalist society, these bad organizations would exist and they would do bad things. And you would have to say they're allowed to do it.
Well, okay, fine. If you want to say, if we had an anarcho-capitalist society, this thing in my head would happen and it could be really bad, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and even argue about that stuff. Okay, fine. I'm talking about, how about in the real world? We live under the biggest government in the history of the world, and look what it's led to. Let's talk about the world we actually live in.
Okay, let's talk about the world that we actually live in. It's my belief that the leftist paradigm, which is a libertarian paradigm of the non-aggression principle, is how leftists are able to control inside of this ginormous government apparatus, which they're continuously expanding. I think that they utilize victim classes like LGBTQ and others and say if they're not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? Libertarians have no way to counteract this because they can't justify why it would be a problem either. So what they end up doing is saying, well, we can't really say shit, can we? We can't really tell you that gays can't be married. We can't really tell you not to expand victim classes. We can't really tell you any of these things because ultimately you believe in the same principle that they do, which is do whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not hurting anybody, man. The good is the good, man. We'll smoke the dope, man.
All of this is that's just completely ridiculous. I think that libertarianism, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, would tell you that the Civil Rights Act was not justified, would tell you that government funding all of these universities is not justified, would tell you that all of this stuff, like, I mean, it would tear down the entire thing.
Wait, it would tell you slavery wasn't, or abolishing slavery wasn't justified?
What?
Would it tell you that abolishing slavery wasn't justified?
What does that have to do with what I just said?
Because that was an act of government, right?
Wait, hold on. But what does that have to do with what I just said?
Because when you're talking about civil rights, we're still going back to self-ownership.
The Civil Rights Act has nothing to do with slavery, dude.
No, but it has to do with self-ownership. And pre-Civil Rights Act, there were slaves, right?
No.
Yeah, there wasn't?
When did you think the Civil Rights Act happened?
The Civil Rights Act happened during the Jim Crow era. But what I'm talking about with slavery specifically is, did they have
100 years before the Civil Rights Act?
Yes. Did they have the right to self-ownership?
Anyway, yes, slaves had a right to not be slaves. But anyway, the point that I'm making is that
then we have logical extensions here, then, Dave, that we have to contend with.
Okay, leave Dave finish his point.
All right, Andrew, whatever, dude. All right, listen, the point that I'm making is to just say that what's happening in a college campus, which is essentially a government program, I mean, all of these colleges, whether they're like state schools or whether they just had all of their loans, you know, guaranteed by the federal government or directly given out by the federal government. It's a big, giant government program. And the idea that they would ever sustain themselves in a market is ridiculous. And the fact that there are young people in those groups now want to identify as not the gender that they were born in has nothing to do with the non-aggression principle or self-ownership or anything about libertarian.
How does it not have to do with
philosophy on government?
Yeah, it does. It does. That's
no,
bullshit.
It doesn't at all. Doesn't at all.
Yeah,
dude.
not only that, but I've been demonstrating it over and over, and you have no defense from it. If you own yourself, why can't you choose your gender? Why can't you get your appendages cut off? Why can't you do these things, Dave? Why shouldn't you be able to?
Wait, if you don't own yours, listen, this is the thing I think you're not understanding, Andrew. I don't even get what you're saying here. If you don't own yourself,
which I don't think you do.
Right. Okay. Why shouldn't you be able to get your
That's my whole,
call
my
yourself
whole
whatever?
Is it because there is no actual self-ownership?
Okay. So I'm saying if
That's
you're
a
right,
non sequitur, Dave. It makes no sense.
Oh my God.
Okay,
what's a non sequitur, Andrew?
What sequitur is saying, but if you don't own yourself, you can do those things too. It has nothing to do with whether you do or not.
Right, but you said, what if you do own yourself? And I'm saying, but what if you don't? So that's the point.
Yeah, what does that have to do with anything?
Okay,
that's the non sequitur.
If I may, I think that there's two ships passing here. I think that the argument that Dave's making is this. If we decrease the size of the federal government and the government in general, as if he's suggesting, culturally, there wouldn't be the sort of brainwashing that's going on through those organizations that make these things a problem. Andrew's saying, though, but the principle of if you own yourself, you could do whatever you want is foundational to a lot of these egregious behaviors that we would see. And so even if we shrunk the size of government, if we did so based on the mentality of, well, you could do whatever you want as long as it's agreed upon by consenting adults, we would see a lot of behavior that he finds to be undesirable or grotesque or sins, such as incest, homosexual relationships, etc.
Oh, all right. Let me ask you this. So I think we could probably all agree that between, let's just say in the last 100 years, the size and scope of government in this country has grown enormously. Obviously, if you are familiar with the paleo-conservatives, they were, hearkening back to the old conservatives who fought the New Deal back in the 1930s. And I could go back a little bit further than that to Woodrow Wilson creating the central bank and the income tax. But you have the New Deal. You have the expansions of government in World War II, the expansions post-World War II with the creation of the CIA and all of that stuff, the national security apparatus, the global empire. You have the Great Society in the 1960s. You have, I don't know, you fast forward to George W. Bush creating the Department of Homeland Security and the war on terrorism and Barack Obama and all this stuff. Do we have more degeneracy now or then? Does it seem like the growth of government has...
but that's a correlate. If I could point to you where there's
I'm just asking, but I'm asking,
so
is there any correlation or any causation in there?
There's some correlation, and I'll grant that there's some correlation, but I can also point to large government apparatuses where the state is entirely in control, where there's no degeneracy because you just face the wall in those governments, right? Sure. So the thing is that just correlating that because government has grown in size and degeneracy has also grown in size, it's not a good argument, because I can point to complete authoritarian regimes where there's none of that at all and the government's totally in charge. So the thing is that
what regimes are you thinking of?
I would guess that like places like North Korea, right? If you engage in degenerate actions, X bad thing happens to you, I would assume. So I'm just saying that the correlate itself is not enough to say that that is the cause. I think that NGOs are also a huge cause of these things, even NGOs which start absent any type of government movement at all, or massive think tanks which are privately funded. And oftentimes you see what'll happen with like the LGBTQ community and things like this. They create their own independent think tanks and NGOs, which then begin a mass lobbying campaign against morality. And once you have a lobbying campaign against morality, there's no real good reason why you should reduce government, because you can't make good claims for why you should. Just like, why should we do any of this stuff? What happens with these LGBTQ think tanks especially, they'll even go into Christian churches, things like this. They offer them bags of money to reevaluate the messaging inside of these churches. These are apparatuses which then go and bribe the government. And these are private institutions. They all start as private institutions. The government's not commissioning.
But then they go and bribe the government.
Yeah, but the government. But here's the thing.
Part of it.
But here's the thing. I think that private institutions will always either form a government or make moves to subvert a government, because it's in their best interest to monopolize force. It's in their best interest to do it, just like it's in our best interest as Christians to monopolize the force apparatus of the state as well. If you want to scale back aspects of the state, great. I want to scale back aspects of the state too. Well, but that really ultimately has nothing to do.
What aspects do you want to scale back?
Oh, I'd like to scale back, especially social spending when it comes to social safety nets. I'd like to scale back a lot.
Why would you want to? I'm just curious. I don't mean to interrupt you, but so why do you want to scale back social aspects of the state?
Because I think that many of those social aspects are violations of ethical concerns. So an ethical concern of robbing Peter to pay Paul, various things like this, I think that those are unethical. Those are ethics concerns.
Okay, and why? Why is that unethical?
It's unethical because I follow Christian ethics, and under this particular ethical framework, we would say that this type of theft would be incorrect, and that the state apparatus, it's not really their concern to move into that. That would be charitable organizations which would move into doing distribution that way.
I'm so curious about this, so I just have to ask, because you kind of like grilled me before about what my ethics are. So what is it? So
we share the same share the same ethics. So sure, I don't know what your argument is.
I'm not making an argument. I'm asking a question. So robbing Peter to pay Paul, why is that unethical? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm saying that if you have centralized relocation from the successful to the non-successful, the reason that this becomes an ethical concern is because you're engaging in theft, obvious theft.
Okay, but isn't that always what government does by its nature?
No.
Is robbing Peter to pay Paul?
No, I don't think that taxation is necessarily theft in many circumstances. I think it can be theft.
What makes it theft in your description, but not in others?
In which description?
So you just said it's obviously theft to rob Peter to pay Paul. So what made that theft, and what makes it not theft in other situations?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly.
He's saying
an example.
You just said in your example that this was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's theft. Yeah. So what makes it theft in that situation, but not theft in other situations?
Like what other situation are you talking about? Dude, I just need a comparison real quick so I understand what you're asking.
What makes it in any other situation that government takes money from people not theft, but in the one you just labeled theft?
You mean, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying, why is it theft to take a bunch of money out of a rich guy's account and give it to a guy, who's just poor because you want to, versus some other unique situation like infrastructure spending or things like this?
What you just said, Andrew. Stop buying time, man. I'm just curious.
I'm not trying to buy time. I just want to get it clarified. I just want it clarified.
Okay,
I don't think that infrastructure spending is theft. I don't think that taxation, property taxation even, is theft. I don't think those things are theft. I think that a direct taking of your account for the purposes of giving it to a social group based on immutable characteristics is theft. That would be theft.
I'm just curious. What makes that theft?
That you're taking a thing which does not belong to you and creating a distribution of the thing which doesn't belong to you.
But so why wouldn't that be true for property taxes?
Because you don't actually own the property.
Right. So, but you just said they're taking something that doesn't belong to you. So, do you actually own that property?
No, this is why I'm saying that the construction,
so why was that theft?
the construction of ownership is just that, a construction.
Yeah,
so property
Andrew,
is a construction.
Hold on, Andrew. I think I have you in something here, and I think I do. Why was it theft?
No, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying it.
Why was it theft in your example? Why did you own it in your example, but not in mine?
Because I don't really understand your example. That's why I'm trying to get it clarified.
It wasn't mine. It was yours. I'm saying
yes, the example of scaling back to rob Peter to pay Paul. I would say that is theft. However, taxation for property, I would not say it is, because
when you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, why is it theft?
Yeah, because it's based around the construction which we have for theft or non-theft for property. That's the point.
If I may, if I could try to clarify, I'm not trying to make anyone's argument.
Yeah. Just clarify what he's talking about.
This is what's going on. Dave's saying, like, look, if under your theory, all taxation would be theft because it's taking away from a person and giving to someone else. You seem to be saying it's not theft if it's giving to sort of a public good. So like property tax to pay for roads, that's not theft. But property tax, presumably you would say this, property tax to pay for welfare for single mothers, that would be theft, or to pay for LGBT issues or something like that. So he's saying, why isn't the property tax always theft? And you seem to be saying it's only theft if that money is given to particular entities. He's asking why that's the case.
Oh, based on immutable versus non-immutable. So if you are utilizing infrastructure and things like this, and you're paying for that infrastructure, you have local levies which are gone through and voted on for that infrastructure. That can't be theft, because essentially the majority of your population is volunteering to move that money into the government coffers for that purpose. Whereas there is no such thing as voluntarism when it comes to the government levying your account. That's not voluntary and never has been. However, you have what's called, I'm going to explain. You have what's called duties, right? Duties can trump theft. For instance, you could say if you own yourself and the government conscripts you, that they're stealing you. Are they stealing you, Dave?
I'm sorry. Are they stealing me?
If the government conscripts you, you have a duty to go. A duty to go defend your homeland if you are conscripted for war. Is the government stealing you?
They're enslaving you, sure.
It's enslavement to be conscripted in a draft to defend your homeland?
Well, I mean, look, you see, to defend your homeland, how about if they conscript you to go over to Ukraine and fight the Russians? Is that enslaving you?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it is, because I think you do have duties.
So if your government, led by Joe Biden, decides that you're now conscripted and you will be on a plane over to Ukraine to fight on the front lines, they haven't enslaved you.
No, I don't think so. I think you have duties still in society. Don't you think you have duties to be conscripted? Like if you were attacked.
No, I think we have lots of duties, but I think if Joe Biden tells you to go die on the front lines,
you might be able to make good moral. You might be able to make good moral.
Enslaved.
Bro, you might be
resist that.
Dave, you might be able to make good moral objections to this type of draft, and the duty itself, that's fine. However, if your homeland's attacked and you're conscripted, that's okay, right? But how is that not enslavement then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it is. Or maybe
Well,
it
right,
is,
it's
but
not,
might.
or it is. It's enslavement to be drafted to protect the homeland if it's attacked by a foreign enemy, Dave.
Yes, essentially,
Yes?
yes, it is.
Yes. Okay.
Look, well, look, so
great.
hold on.
So no duty at all. No
thing.
duties.
Here's the thing: is that it's funny because you start laughing, but then like you can't. When I say if you were grabbed, gun put to your head, and dragged out to the Ukrainian front lines and forced to fight on the Ukrainian front lines, you can't say yes, that is me being enslaved.
I think you can
But
make
then you
moral
turn it-
objections
hold
to
on,
it.
let
Yeah.
me hold on. Then you turn it to what if like people are invading our country. Okay, so I'll say this: if people were invading our country and people like a foreign army is coming up through my neighborhood, I think you sure could make a moral argument that I have a responsibility to go to
A
those
duty.
front line.
Right. This is
Okay,
the point
well,
when
hold
we're
on,
talking about the
one sec, let me
draft, so we're not
let me
talking
just
past
finish
each other.
this. Let me just finish this. So I think you could make an argument that I have a moral responsibility to go to the front lines and start fighting to make sure my family is okay.
What if you don't have a
However-
family?
Leave him finish.
Huh? What'd you
What
say?
if you don't have a family? It's just
Okay,
you.
but I'm talking about me, and I do. So anyway, let me finish.
But what if you didn't? Would you have a moral obligation then?
Great. So let me just finish.
Okay.
So, but if I say make the judgment that I go, you know what? There's too many of them. We got to retreat and we got to try to surround them and come back. And someone puts a gun at my face and goes, no, you have to go to the front line right now. Then yeah, in essence, they have enslaved me.
So then you're making my point again so that you understand.
No, I'm not.
Well, yeah, I'll explain how. When you're talking about duties, you asked me, you said, would it be a duty? So I'm talking about what is a current duty. So I'm saying, yeah, currently that would be your duty. But to moral objections, which you could make would be about just. You could say it's an unjust war, so therefore it doesn't fall under my duties. You are making the exact same claim. This is an unjust war. It doesn't fall under my duties, right? So if I'm conscripted, though, for a just war, like an invasion, then it does fall under duty. So then it's not enslavement, right? However, in both situations, it still would be enslavement by your ideology. You don't really have duty here.
That's not really the distinction. The distinction is whether voluntarism versus force. So no, I'm not saying that. Like, if there could be a just war where someone still flees and abandons the war, but that doesn't mean that if they were but look, even whether you
dereliction of duty,
whether you think it's justified or not, it would still be enslaving someone to force them to be a soldier in that war.
So if you
want to be a part of it.
So if you're conscripted and your homeland is under attack, you have no greater duty to defend your homeland.
It depends on the situation, man. Look, there were lots of people in Ukraine who fled, and I don't know that they were wrong. I don't know. Listen, a situation like the war in Ukraine, the United States of America and NATO provoked Russia for decades. Literally just poked this fucking bear.
Dude, this is on a tangent that has nothing, no bearing on the moral.
No. It has total bearing. Give me 2 seconds and you'll understand what I'm saying. They poked this bear over and over again until Russia invaded. And then when Russia invaded and Ukraine was about to get fucked up, look, I understand where there'd be people in Ukraine who wanted to jump on the front lines and fight again. But I also understand where there'd be people who go, listen, I got to try to get my family out and get the hell out of here. So it's not so black and white as to like whether like there's this situation where someone invades your country and it's just justified to fight back against them. I think maybe if you're listening,
we're talking
to what I'm
not
saying,
about that. We're talking
point.
about conscription, though.
Okay.
So I do. And I'll steel man. Hang on. I'll steel man the point. Yeah,
listen.
Let me steel man the point.
Last point on this, then we're going to get to closing statements because we have a lot of super chats and questions from the audience. So
yeah. So let me just steel man your point. Your point is, look, this isn't so black and white. There could be situations where I could see conscription as being a duty. I can see it as not being a duty. I'm not arguing that. I just want a concession that at least sometimes it must be. And if at least sometimes it must be a duty, then you do have greater duties than just owning you. Just owning you can't be enough. There must be additional duties on top of that, like conscription.
Sure. Well, look, if you're saying just owning me, again, I have a ton of duties on top of just owning me. I have a duty an obligation to protect my wife, my kids, to provide for them,
Why?
to give them a great life.
If you own yourself, why do you have such a duty?
Again, from what we said at the very beginning, it has nothing to do with owning myself. I do own myself. And why do I have such a duty? Because I believe in God, and God wants me to be a great father and a great husband.
So God owns you.
Okay. Listen, there's never a good place to end. I know that it sucks. We could keep going on with this. What we're going to do is do closing statements. It'll be up to 7 minutes apiece. We will start with Dave. You can say whatever you want. Andrew, don't interrupt. And then Andrew can say whatever he wants. So you can summarize the debate. You could any positions that you wanted to clarify, whatever you like for 7 minutes. Then we'll get to some audience questions. So go ahead, Dave. Floor is yours.
All right. Well, look, let me just say before we go to these questions, I will say I have the feeling that Andrew annoyed me a bit in this debate, but I have a feeling I would really like the guy if we just hung out. And I actually have enjoyed some of the back and forths that we've had on this. So I would just say that I think there's been some points that are made here that I don't think accurately reflect the position that I'm taking, and perhaps I've been unfair in some of the positions Andrew's taking. So let's just say I own a book. Like, let's say, I don't know, one of these books right here. Okay, here. I got a book. Okay? I own this book. Now, it's a really good book, by the way. This is what is this? This is The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. I don't know. That happened to be the book next to me. Now, let's say I get that book. Now, I've read it. I've actually read it twice. But let's just say I bought that book and I own it. And instead of reading it, I burned it. And you were to say, wait a minute, Dave, do you own that book? If you own it, it would be wrong for you to burn it rather than read it. The point is that, yes, I probably agree with you. It would be a better thing for me to do to read that book than to burn it. That has nothing to do with whether I own it or whether it would be right for someone else to come by force and take it away from me. I think that's kind of like the difference that's been, we've been talking past each other a little bit. I think that some of these outlandish examples about, well, if you really believe in self-ownership, then you can have no moral qualms about what anyone does with their self-ownership, just isn't accurate. And I think that in the world we're living in, and this is something, again, that the paleo-conservatives, their best thinkers, please, anybody listening, go read Pat Buchanan or Paul Gottfried or Sam Francis or any of these guys. One of the things that they understood was that part of the reason why American society has degenerated so much, part of the reason why we've had such a divergence from normalcy in our culture is because the government has gotten more and more powerful. And if you want to have more power in the hands of communities and churches and parents and families, you want to reduce the size and scope of government. So that's what I would say, and whatever Andrew wants to finish with before we go into questions.
Okay, sounds good. Andrew, you got up to 7 minutes. Go ahead.
You would like me. I'm a real fun guy to be. I'm just a fun guy, Dave. Okay. So the thing is I did enjoy the debate. Just so you know, I don't take any of this kind of stuff personally. I think that this type of discourse, as brutal as it can be, and as entertaining as I think it is for people because it's so brutal, I don't feel like you're a guy who holds personal grudges. And it seems like you kind of enjoy, as much as you might not have enjoyed some aspects of it, I think that you probably enjoy the back and forth as much as I do. Ultimately, though, you have to reevaluate some things here, I think, ultimately. And I'm still going to bring you around to my way of thinking. And perhaps next time we won't do a debate, but we'll just do a good old-fashioned convo. The first thing is that you kind of pretend and are pretending to the audience that these are extreme examples of things which I bring up, but they're not. These are things which are happening right now. We have incest laws right now. We have laws against LGBTQ or for LGBTQ right now. These are social issues of our time, transitioning social issue of our time. These things are not things which are in a far away, far off land, in a faraway future. These are right now, right here, right in our face, and we're discussing them as though they're right in our face because they are. And so when we get to the moral ought portion of this, you realized, I think, early on that you can't really justify self-ownership as anything other than a construction, and that your morality comes from God. That's why I was willing to just kind of grant all the absurdity and say, sure, it's just God talking in my mind. Dave says, me too. It's like, great. Well, then we agree. It's all divine command. There's no ownership. It's just a social construct. Perfect. Now we know where we can go with our moral ought claims, how we get to where it is that we're going. Unfortunately, for these oughts, we're going to need enforcement. There's no way around it. And that's going to require some type of enforcement apparatus. Now, maybe it doesn't have to be the state. Fine. But I didn't hear anything absent the state. I never actually heard Dave say a word about why people can't engage in these if they own themselves. Unfortunately, he never really gave us any good reasons for why, if you do own yourself, why you can't engage in these absurd activities, other than he just really doesn't like them, other than to appeal to what I would, which is divine command. And if that's the case, you don't own yourself, and the non-aggression principle no longer makes sense. He never could justify that, ever. And that was kind of the core at the heart of this debate. When we get into duties, he says, I do have some duties and obligations, but when I ask him where they come from, it's from God. Again, it's divine command, which gives him these duties and obligation, not libertarianism. Libertarianism as a core isn't doing anything to advance what could be a duty inside of society. It's just unfettered rights. And all a right is a privilege absent a duty. When we get into whether or not can a person be conscripted, sometimes, maybe, don't know, kind of, possibly. It just, it's context matters. It's like, okay, yeah, context matters, but at the core, can they, without them being slaves? I think that Dave kind of understands, yeah, there's a time and a place for that, where there's a greater duty that we have to appeal to. Overall, because it was combative, and we are coming at it from really different worldviews, I don't think we got to the heart of everything that either of us would have liked to have gotten to the heart of. But I did enjoy the spirited debate, and again, no grudges at all, Mr. Smith. And in the future, I'll just come on your show and and we'll have a good convo or something like that. But I do hope you did enjoy yourself at the very least. So thank you.
I did enjoy myself, Andrew, and thank you very much. I don't agree with your synopsis of my opinion, but I am definitely down to do another podcast together.
Well, cheers to you, sir.
Cheers, brother.
I had fun. I loved it.
Oh, we can drink?
Oh, yeah.
Nationalists? We're going to make that legal? All right, good.
Yes, good.
Cheers,
I insist.
I thought it was great. I would love to talk to both of you. I was writing down things if I was debating either of you, I would have said to both of you, but we don't have time for that tonight. So here's what I'm going to do. We are going to go through half of the super chats. There's a lot. So audience, I ask you to please bear with me, and because we have a lot of people that are on the call as well. So we have about an hour and 15 minutes left. So the first thing I want to say is thank you to anyone who subscribed or that donated subscriptions to people and memberships. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot. We're going to try to... And
as a quick intermission, I'm sorry to cut in. Dave, while you're at maximum audience, can you shout your channel out, tell everybody where they can find you and where they can follow you?
ComicDaveSmith.com is my website, and at Comic Dave Smith on Twitter, and I'm part of the problem on YouTube and all over the place. But yeah.
Okay, well, I just want to let you know that I had worked on this great rhetorical flourish that I was ready to use tonight that I couldn't deploy. So I'm just going to tell you what it was. It was going to be, okay, so it was supposed to be this this idea that, it came up where you would say something like, well, I'm a comedian, you know what I mean? I'm not going to know the great ins and outs of these moral oughts. And then I was going to respond with, oh yeah, well, I'm an entertainer and I'm super entertaining. So tell me a joke, funny man. And it would have been rhetorically effective, Dave, but I never got to employ it. So I'm pretty upset about that. I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty upset about that.
All right. Well, listen, it was a good plan. It was a good
plan. It was a good plan.
Yeah.
It just never happened.
So I am going to not read each subscription donated, but we do appreciate it. But I hope the audience will understand.
Just 20 and up on the supers, bro.
Okay.
20 and up.
All right. So here we go. You sure? Just 20 and up? All right. That's fine. So we got from Daniel Morgan. Dave, what objective standard do you ground moral laws such as the non-aggression principle or anything for that matter in? I know you believe in God, but if that's just general theism, by what standard do you ground any objective morality?
I mean, it's a good question. I think that I don't know that me or Andrew had a better answer for that than I always thought before I was a believer in God that it was kind of a silly argument that theists made when they said you can't have morality without a divine power. And the more since I've found God, I've agreed that yeah, you probably can't. Like there really is no other way to get to morality without a belief in a creator. And since I've believed in a creator, and I don't think that's not even really the right way to say it. Since I had my first kid, I've just kind of known. Like I just kind of since I've been aware that there is a God, it's been just more obvious that most of the things that are just deep rooted in us as inherently wrong or right come from that. And so I don't know if I have much of a better like moral foundation than to just go that all of us deep in our core know there are certain things that are wrong and certain things that are right.
We're going to get you over on the duck side where it's happening.
I don't think so, but I do agree with that. I mean, I do think that's the center of all of it.
Cal Chopper Outdoors for $19.99 says, one time for the stepdads. Now, technically, Andrew said I shouldn't have read that because it was only 20 and up, but I figured we'd give him the penny.
It's close enough. We'll give him the penny.
Right?
Give him the penny.
Well, all right.
In Biden's economy.
I've known some good stepdads. By the way, Andrew, do you have a better answer for that than for me of like what's right and wrong? Like, is there anything better than that?
Usually libertarians will use argumentation ethics, which I know you're a big
no, but that's a different thing. I love argumentation ethics, but I'm saying that's a different question.
It is actually a decent way to create justifications around moral oughts, argumentation ethics. It actually is.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that ultimately, you can't really make. I mean, Zulu does this all the time. He seems to be pretty good at this. A guy named Liquid Zulu, at creating justifications out of argumentation ethics. So I've enjoyed watching those debates, but I don't think that you can create good, objective, justified morality absent divine command. I don't think you can. No.
Yeah. Unconventional Man says the argument is so good it got Dave saying to himself, "Shit." I think it's what for $50, and then he throws another 50 down. Wow, this guy, he must have been one of those guys that got one of those jobs Biden was talking about today. Unconventional Man for another 50 says slavery has been illegal for years. Yet here's Andrew owning Dave. Shit.
Oh, you son of a bitch. I don't think that's what happened.
I thought you could have got in with the shit there. You know, like we set you up on the first one and you didn't even get in on the second one. Pretty disappointed in you, Dave.
I'm sure Dave will agree with this, regardless who you think won the debate. This guy for $50, Sean, says Dave is getting frustrated. LOL.
I did it at one point. That's fair.
Okay. Yeah. You can be frustrated. I get frustrated in debates sometimes too.
And what we'll do is if we have time after the callers, we'll go back to super chats that weren't worth 20, but we only have limited time. So we're trying to get through what we can. Blackest Panther for $20 says, Andrew thought he was debating an intelligent person and came in guns a-blazing. You overestimated Dave's grasp of debate or logic. Taking a debate stance doesn't mean you agree with the stance. It's a debate of ideas and not morals. Anyone want to respond? Just more shit talking than a question, I think.
Well, I think that the two are inexplicably intertwined.
Okay, let's go with Righteous Muffin for $20 says, Andrew, you and Dave are in the same place. He wants libertarianism ran his way. You want Christian ethics ran your way. There are different sects of Christianity. Why is yours the correct one? Because you said so?
Because I can create philosophical justifications for my own, and my own is the original Church of Christ. By the way, that's why.
Would you agree, though, that perhaps the people that would come into power would not share your interpretation?
Of course, it's a possibility, which is why I advocate that Christians should be trying to seize power. I think it's a good idea. Dave actually advocates the same thing for libertarians. He recognizes the same flaw in his own party, which is, we can't be so idealistic. We forget that we have to actually have power for our idealism, right? Like, there's no way around that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, I don't know what this MX.
No, skip it. Okay. We don't take pesos here, sir.
Yeah, I'm a rural boy. I don't know that shit. Only dollars here. All right. Nick says for $20, was just thinking a few days ago that this is a discussion I would love to see, and here it is. Huzzah. Agree. I thought it was really good.
Huzzah!
Let's see. A couple more. John the Wise Tushy for $50 says, libertarian morality? Chase Oliver, I assume gay man for president. Please run from the Libertarian Party. Dave, any thoughts on, I know I've seen some of your thoughts on Twitter, but anything to say about Chase Oliver and what that says about
Dude, you got to be better than that guy. That guy sucks, dude.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not going to defend that, but what do you know?
Just do it. Just run.
Republicans got to be better than Donald Trump and, picking Nikki Haley, who he just guaranteed would be in his cabinet. And, I don't know. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks to be a part of a thing and hope someone who's going to represent it will represent it the right way and not get that. So
you don't have to answer, but are you going to vote for Trump? Have you decided, or is it something you don't want to talk
I don't, honestly, I'm not a big believer in voting, but especially voting for president. But I, the idea of me doing something where it takes, I don't know, a couple of hours for you to have a 1 in 150 millionth say in it. I don't know. I do way more important shit than that. I don't spend 2 hours on something that unimportant. So it doesn't matter that much to me, but yes, I don't know.
All right.
That's I'm not going to vote for Chase. That's for sure.
Zen's Forehead for $19.99 says, Dave, the argument that Andrew is making is that duties from the prism of theist morality entail the violation of self-ownership, which the non-aggression principle banks on. It's a contradiction of the two worldviews. So
right.
Basically, if I can interpret it, what he's saying is, if you adapt Christian ethics, then there is morality that comes from that is directly oppositional to the idea of self-ownership.
No, okay. So, give me an example.
Like conscription.
Okay, but in what scenario?
In the most charitable scenario you can possibly think of.
If you can say conscription in the most charitable scenario, fine. But then maybe you just have to own the principle of conscription in general. So if we're just going to argue that, it's I think conscription in general is horrifically immoral.
Yeah, but
there's
at least certain cases where it's not, right?
I mean, maybe, yes, maybe.
Yeah.
But
that's what he's getting at.
Fine. But if we're going to move out of just the realm of pure theory into the realm of the real world, then conscription has been pretty evil most of the times it's been used.
I don't actually disagree with that. I think that there's moral objections to that, but I'm not saying that I morally object necessarily to the duty of conscription, though.
Okay.
That's the thing, right?
Fair enough, but still you would grant that handing people the power of conscription could lead to bad results.
Handing anybody power for anything could lead to bad results.
Fair enough.
We agree with that.
Vitellius for $20 says, for the disconnect on ownership, a person goes to a car lot and can control a car, but they don't own it. A person can control their body and actions, but not themselves. God owns that person.
Yeah, I would say that that's true. That those who move towards divine command theory would say that God has ownership of you. You do not actually have ownership of you. You have will. That's true. And maybe the only right that anybody's ever been able to really say is an actual right that I could maybe agree with is the right to free will. But other than that, I'm not even sure that's a right, because it seems like it's part of your just ontology. It's how men are built and women are built. It's part of what makes you you. So I'm not even sure I would call that a right.
I think it's pretty clear to me that God has granted us with self-ownership. And that doesn't mean that we can't do very bad things with that self-ownership, or we can't do very good things with that. But most of the time that I'm talking to God, I recognize that he has granted me the ability to do what I want to do. And in talking to him, I'm recognizing that I know he wants me to do better than I'm doing. But it's my choice whether I want to do that or not.
Does God own you?
No. I wouldn't say, and when I say no, I mean that I think God doesn't, doesn't own me in the sense that I own anything that I own. He's not just controlling me the way he wants to. I think it's very clear, and I think you'd agree with me on this, Andrew, that he's allowing me to decide.
Have you ever prayed to God for intercession?
Prayed to God for what?
Intercession.
What is that? I'm sorry.
Like to intervene and help you in your life.
Yeah, many times.
Yeah. So if God intercedes on your behalf in order to help you in your life, would he have to affect other people's will to do that?
Well, no, not exactly. Not other people's will. He'd have to affect what happens to people. Like I've never prayed to God for him to like make someone who didn't want to come back to me or something like that. No.
Right. Yeah, that seems kind of absurd, right?
So
but it sounds like you're giving
prayed to God to make sure that like my kids are okay.
Sure.
But like that's not exactly like praying that like they're not, I don't know, that it's not a violation of their self-ownership or something like that. But I've also never felt like, look, I've prayed to God to make sure, and by the way, it's very limited, the things that I've prayed to God for. And I intentionally try to keep it this way because I try my best to never pray to God for things that are just like self-serving or fleeting or anything like that. So I've prayed to God for my son to make it through his surgery okay. I've prayed to God for my wife to give birth to my kids and be healthy and stuff like that. But and every single time I've ever prayed to God for those very important things, I've always been making a deal with God in my mind, which is a very weird thing that really convinces me that I'm right to believe in God. But it's that I've always been making a deal where I go, listen, if you just make sure my son's okay, I'll do X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z are always just
bargaining with God.
Yes.
Sure.
But X, Y, and Z is always just me being a good person. And that's one of the things that really convinced me that God's real, that I was like, how do I have this like just deep impulse that God wants me to be a better person? And I'll go, listen, if you do this, I promise I'll, whatever, I'll be a good father, I'll be a good husband, I'll be a good person, all these things. And while I was asking God to intervene in a certain way, what I was promising was always something only I could control. And I knew he wasn't going to like force me to do that or force me not to do that. I knew that it was my decision, but I also knew that he wanted me to do that.
Let's assume for a second that God could put a truck in front of he could convince the truck owner to put a truck in front of a prostitution house that your son was about to walk into. And he avoided that because God had convinced the person to park the truck there. Would you want him to?
I think that my job is to raise my son well enough that that's not an issue.
But if it
was, I don't know.
You don't know?
Honestly, I don't know. And I don't know because I'll say this, right, Andrew? So my kids grow up in a world so different than I grew up in. And I don't know that much about you or your story, but I'll just tell you that like I grew up in a pretty fucked up environment. And my kids are raised in a very loving environment. Like my kids are like, I mean, Jesus Christ. They're just surrounded by love and they have everything they need and and so anyway, I don't see my son ever being in that situation, but I was certainly in that situation. And I went through a lot of situations in my life that I don't know that God stopping me from going there was any better than me going there and then recognizing what that was and then learning from that. So it's a little bit difficult.
I just have one last quick follow-up,
Sure.
Just really quick yes or no. Do you believe that Christ is God?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I don't like, I don't have a strong opinion on what religion is right or wrong. I just know that I found God after I had my kids and I've had a relationship with him ever since.
I'm telling you, we're going to get you over to the dark side.
We'll
But
get to
anyway,
the.
go ahead.
I don't know about that, but we'll see.
We'll see.
We do appreciate the super chats keep coming in, so we're going to get through these real fast because we got a lot of callers. So I'll try as fast as possible. If you all have something you think's really important to say to one of these, please go ahead. But otherwise, we'll zoom through them. So here we go.
Yeah, we want to save at least an hour for callers.
We're at an hour left.
I want to try to get him out at a hard 3. I did promise him that we would try to do that. I did. So
all right. So there's never been a society of 350 million people didn't having a government. Dave had to concede there are an infinite number of things an ANCAP can't account for, most notably who fills the enforcement positions. Department of Numismatics.
But I don't think that's right at all. But okay, fine, sure.
My libertarian neighbor, I shouldn't have read this one. My libertarian neighbor posted a newspaper ad selling his collection of Star Trek ships, and here I thought he believed in free enterprise.
That's kind of
All right,
funny.
that is
Come
pretty
on,
funny.
that's funny.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Shannon 531 for $20 says, as an atheist lib who knows what's right and wrong with my deep gut feeling, answers the winner. As much as I disagree, at least he's a consistent religious person. The map's what he thinks on to society's prescriptions. JL says, the father allows the prodigal son to take his inheritance and go waste it. Then once he becomes back to his senses, he decides to repent and come back to his father. The father didn't force him to come back. Iron Ball Sack for $19.99 says, debating is for bromos. Have Andrew on POTP and have an actual conversation. We are on the same page, gang. Ben George for $20.
Happy to.
Ben George for $20 says,
I will listen. Dave came in and he's running the Crucible. That's why it's called the Crucible. He is running the Crucible. We're about to get to callers. He's going to run more of the Crucible. If Dave wants me to come on his program, we're coming on the program. It's reciprocal always.
Absolutely. Happy to have you on.
All right. Ben George for $20 says, God doesn't own you. You give yourself to God and trust in his will. Unfortunately, people have given themselves over to the government, even though no one trusts them. JL says for $20, given that this is a parable of the prodigal son, which was said previously by him, illustrates how God works with us. What is your justification for thinking God has commanded us to enforce his divine commandment? You want to answer real quick, or let's get to callers? I'm sure that there'll be something reference that. Now, real quick to the callers.
Okay, always save Casimir till last. Kaz, go get yourself a nice drink. We're going to give you the most time because you're the most adamant. You are the libertarian, Andrew.
Yeah.
So go take your time and do whatever you need. Kaz comes last. So
Okay.
that's the rules.
All right, that's fair. So I'm going to ask just two things of the callers. One, please abide by terms of service, please. If you want to yell at people, that's fine. I think everyone here is...
If they don't put on their camera and wave other than spoons, we can't have them on, Rob.
Okay.
So
All
anybody who has your camera on, you're going to get preferential treatment.
All right, so cameras get preferential treatment other than spoons. So let's start with spoons then. And the other thing I'll ask is, please, we don't have 15 minutes for everyone. Unfortunately, I wish we had more time, but we don't. So keep it to like 5 minutes back and forth. Ask a question, maybe have one retort, and that's it. So, okay. Spoons. Go ahead, you're up first. Can't hear you.
Why can I not hear you guys?
There you go.
There you go. Can you hear us?
Hold on a second.
Okay. Real quick second,
Yep.
Spoons.
All right. We'll
Spoons,
get you next,
gotta.
Spoons.
We'll get you next, Spoons.
All right. If Casimir's last, then we're going to go to Spiro. Go ahead, Spiro, you're up.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, damn, I have my virtual camera. Okay. So question. So Dave, you showed you have a book there. You said I own the book, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the book is yours, yeah? You paid
Sure.
money for it. It's in your possession. So let's assume that this book, for just for a minute, because I'm trying to help kind of like show you the delineation between ownership and duty. This book, were you to read it, would give you the ability to become a significantly better human being, primarily to your family. Nobody else knows this aside from you. Nobody else gives one single shit whether you read the book or not. Your kids aren't going to give a shit. Your wife's not going to give a shit. Nobody's going to know the fucking difference, whether you read the fucking book or not. Do you, however, feel like you have some moral imperative to read the book to become a better person?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the book is.
Doesn't matter what the book is. The book could literally have the word T in it. Just by the nature of you opening the book and reading that letter T, magical shit happens and you become a significantly better person for everyone around you, but you're the only person that knows this to be the fact.
I'm not sure what the question is.
So I guess what I'm trying to delineate
so
here.
let's say that I do. Reading a book about something that I care about might make me a better person. Is that the question?
You know
Well,
it's
so-
going to. You know it's going to make you a
I
better
know
person
it's
just
gonna
by
make me a better
opening the
person.
cover. Do you have a duty and obligation, if you knew that that book would make you a better person for your family, to read it?
I would say yes, in a sense. So like if I'm if
Peace.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, go let Dave
let's hear what
respond.
Dave has to say. It's a mic drop, I guess.
That's a funny mic drop moment.
Yeah.
Fucking got this motherfucker with that.
Wait, take that, Dave.
Well, look, I mean, I think that I have, and I've felt this way particularly. So I have 2 kids. My daughter is my oldest; she's 5, and my boy is 2. But I've really felt this more since I had a son. Although I'm sure this was true when I just had a daughter also. But that I do feel like if I'm going to be a guy who's out on shows, you know, talking about what I believe in, then I better know something about what I think I believe in. And so, you know, if I'm reading a book about whatever, like maybe it's, you know, I have a debate on the war going on in
That one region,
territories.
right?
Yeah. That one region.
In that region that was here we go. YouTube has their rules, and then the New York Times, you're not allowed to say occupied territories. So
Yep.
if I were to have opinion on the territory, which has
People are
has
there
had
that-
other people in it for many years.
Just stop. Just
Anyway,
just button
all
it
right,
up,
no.
Dave.
But
Button it
let's say-
up.
Let's say if I were to do a debate about that, like, and I'm trying, I think me reading up about and knowing what I'm talking about, yes, I do find that there's some sense of duty I have, because that's like the impression that I want to give to my kids, is that you're supposed to know something about what you're talking about, and you're supposed to care about it, and you're supposed to stand up for the truth, even if it's a little bit inconvenient for you. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Remember, we're prioritizing people with their.
By the way, I got a woman from the New York Times came up to me at the outside of the libertarian convention and interviewed me for a bit, and I was like, "What's it like to talk about the occupied territories when you're not allowed to say occupied territories?"
She's yeah.
By the way, she just laughed. She thought it was so funny.
It's actually pretty funny.
Yeah,
it is funny.
All right, Jacob, go ahead, sir.
What's up, Jacob?
I'm still mad that
Hey.
you didn't let me use my line, Dave. I'm gonna, you know what? Somehow I'm gonna like get it in this,
Do it in
whatever
this
this
show.
next exchange is. I'm getting it in there.
Oh,
I'm getting it
I'm
in
glad-
there, Dave.
Well,
I'm
Jacob
glad
is
you
the
boys
reason I'm
kissed in-
here, by the way. So
I'm glad you guys kissed and made up. I was
we had a rough opening.
we had a little rough opening there. So I had a question for Andrew. Andrew, you said that taking money from like one person or one party to pay another is theft, but not when they're using it to like build infrastructure.
No.
Right?
It can be theft. It depends on how it equates to Christian duty. So what is duty to the state? What is duty to the church, and what is duty to you? So you do have an obligation to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And we do think that you get the government that you deserve. And the reason you get the government that you deserve is because you are the moral arbiter of the things which are around you. That's what will is. And we do
Right, but you're
have
saying-
exactly the government that we deserve.
But what's the because I'm trying to find your standard for when it's theft and when it isn't, because you said if they're taking it from like rich people to give it to a demographic on immutable characteristics, that was your argument. You would say by Christian ethics that's immoral.
Oh,
But
no.
if they're-
Only so here's the thing. Only that it could be. The thing is that taxation, that's it, right? It's all about nuance, right? The thing is that it could be. So the question is, when does it become? That's what you're asking me. Like, when was X taking from you become theft? It's a harder question to answer. And even under Christian ethics or any ethical system, when you are going to deprive what we have socially constructed to be property, we're going to have some kind of value add here to figure out what your duty is. So you basically would have to take this on a case by case to make a determination.
But if you
That's why I was asking for the delineation of where the case is.
But then, like on your system, because you're advocating for a Christian society with Christian government, like, well, wouldn't these Christians just pay for these things voluntarily anyway? Is the other point? But it seems to me,
Of course,
what
that's
you
why I
said-
brought up social programs. So under social programs, the answer is probably yes. But what about infrastructure? If we come to infrastructure or conscription, or
Well, who makes
you
the
know,
infrastructure?
having
Like, it's not
having
the
to
infrastructure
defend.
is
Hang on,
not-
let me finish. I'm almost done. Or defending the homeland. If you have a conscription and you have the military defending your homeland from attack, is that unethical? I'm not so sure that it is, bro. No.
It just seems to me that I don't see a clear standard here, because even with infrastructure, you're still just taking money from one group of people to give to another. It's all just redistribution from a central plan.
Yeah, but the argument of redistribution is not my argument. Simply redistributing, because that's how Caesar chooses to do things,
redistribution
doesn't necessarily mean it's theft. No, we have biblical standards for what theft is.
So it's when,
But
well,
I'm still not getting what the I'm just curious. What's the standard? When is it theft and when isn't it?
Well, it would be case use. So we would have to balance duty versus the case use. The same with conscription. Yes.
No, I mean I'm just asking. When would it be theft? When wouldn't it be?
It depends on what the example is as to what your state duties are under Christian ethics, and when those duties come into play.
Okay, I just
same thing with conscription, right?
Sure,
that's why I bring up the counterexample of conscription. If conscription is moral, then this would mean that funding the army would be moral as well. And so you would have to necessarily tax the populace for this. Is that immoral? I don't think it is.
I don't think conscription is moral, but I'm just saying you're claiming that we have a subjective, metric, but what's yours?
Well, I would say that you are going to get the representative government, which is part of the value of the morality of the public. And to give to Caesar, hang on, to give to no, I don't like voting at all.
And that passage
not even a little bit.
Render unto Caesar does not support paying taxation, because if it did, the Pharisees would not have walked away amazed by his answer. They were trying to trap him.
That's true. It doesn't.
There's a great Mises Institute article on this, how they were trying, and this is just biblical theology. The Christian fathers have talked about this, that the Pharisees were, and it's in the scripture, they were trying to entrap him. And if he would have said, yeah, pay your taxes, he would have been discredited to the entire crowd and all of his followers. Instead, his answer was basically throwing it back in their face, saying,
and what about the parable of the talons?
The parable of the talons has nothing to do
with parable,
taxation.
But wait, who are you making money for the parable of the talons?
It was for the
who?
I remember the
master.
The master, yeah.
The master. That's the parable of the talons,
it was his
right?
Property. So yeah,
and hang on, stop. You had an obligation under the parable of the talons to use your talents, or I'm sorry, under the parable of the talents to use your talents in order to make more money for the master, right? And we're equating this parable. And why are we equating this parable to? He's basically saying, look, don't be a fucking piece of shit. And when you're tasked with a duty, you should essentially give it.
Do it. Don't be lazy.
Yeah, do it. Don't be lazy. Don't do this.
Right.
But there is a master inside of this parable. And the thing is that could the state be that master? Yeah, I think it could be under certain circumstances. Can we scale some things back? Sure. But we would have to take it on a case use, which is exactly what Dave's advocating. A case use. Fine. Come over to the ethics side.
Okay, Jacob, we give you the last word here, and then we got to get to the next call.
Yeah, I know we get other callers. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have to get into this another time. I also just want to say, Dave, when you have Andrew on Part of the Problem, you guys please need to talk about I'm tired of hearing this dumb myth from Michael Knowles and Andrew, and I told this when I was on his show a couple weeks ago, that libertarians duped the conservative movement.
Totally.
The Buckleyites and the neocons are just like libertarianism is not egalitarianism.
I'd love to talk about that.
So you guys need to talk about that, okay?
All right. I'm happy to get into whatever Mr. Smith would like to get into. But yeah, the thing is, Jacob, is like, I don't believe that you think ultimately. I think that I can give you many scenarios where taxation, you wouldn't consider it to be theft. All right. Including conscription for the homeland. And so the thing is I don't know how we could adjudicate this except on a case-by-case basis where we could apply the ethical standard to it.
You know, what's interesting is I think that the ethical standard that you're even implying there is something that's kind of consistent with libertarianism. So you're almost saying conscription would be justified if what? If we were defending our own homeland, right? Like you're saying if there was an invading army, you could force the men to defend their homeland, and that would be justified.
Well, that
right?
would not be libertarian ethics because
no, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking about what.
You said it would be in line with libertarian ethics, and it couldn't be because you are forcing them to do X.
Okay, fine. So you're right. It's not exactly in line, but I'm saying that it would only be the only scenario where you could justify conscription would be if someone was attacking our homeland and you were saying, hey, we're forcing the able-bodied men to defend it.
Even if you were to have
a situation where we could be taking someone else's
I'm a big believer in preemptive strikes, or that you could have a greater moral duty if there are enough problems happening inside of a society where you would have a moral obligation to intervene in that society.
Okay.
I think that's totally acceptable.
Okay. All right.
Jacob, thank you so much for the call. Really appreciate it. All right. Let's
Jacob, thank you. By the way, it's good to see you again, Jacob.
All right.
And by the way, thanks for vouching for me. While it started off rough, I think me and Mr. Smith are going to be pals out of all this. I think
we're becoming great friends.
All right. Now you do. Before you go, I just want to say, objectively, Andrews lost the debate. He said he was going to make that comedian joke here. He did not do it. He said he did not do the next call.
That's true. That is an L for Andrew on that one. That's true. I'll take the L on that.
All right. Not your dude. Go ahead.
Hey, Dave. So you admitted at one point that you find it difficult to come to the ultimate basis of morality without God. So would you agree that concepts like morality can't be empirically verified?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there is something about, as we talked about earlier, the Hoppian argumentation ethics that I think does kind of do an end around the is-ought dichotomy. And I think there is something to that. But that being said, yeah, I don't, to get to a place of true, like, right and wrong, I don't know that you can get there without believing in something bigger than the realm that we're existing in right now.
So why did you seem to keep rejecting the idea of divine command? Like it seemed like you found it laughable that that would be a moral basis.
I don't think it's laughable. I was saying that I guess that's the same thing I have. Is that, I was just saying what I found laughable.
The dark side with Dave. Dark side.
Well, what I found laughable was saying that there's nothing on my side beyond that, and then claiming the response is also that. That's all I was saying. But
but so you know, in the future, if there's any reference to the same assertion that you make, and I say, well, I just reference it the same way. It puts us on equal footing so that we can continue the discussion external to whatever this bog down is. That's why I'm just able to grant these things quickly so that we can try to get to the heart of the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. As I said, I don't really think there's, even though I remember before I found God, being an atheist and thinking that's crazy. We can all just know what right and wrong is. Yeah. But the more you think about it, you go, yeah, there really is no way to get.
Yeah,
to
it is pretty difficult
with that. And in a sense, the reason why so many atheists feel that way is because they already do believe, whether they know it or not.
That's the thing. They know. They definitely know. It's a cognitive dissonance. That's why so many of them are douchebags.
Yes, look, I tend to agree with you on that. I think that it's something that weirdly, I don't know that all of them know. I think a lot of them don't know, but they just have a thing inside them. There's a thing that's inside us that tells us what's right and wrong. And a lot of people want to pretend that they don't need God in order to know that. But it doesn't really make sense without it.
I just have one more comment.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of callers, though. The churches that you mentioned as getting more community influence under libertarianism, they necessarily believe that their eternal governance is going to be one that's worth utterly submitting to, even to the point of prostrating before like the head of it all. So by necessity. We believe that spreading en masse like a Christian worldview into the government is a better solution than just diminishing it to the point of it being almost arbitrary in a lot of respects.
If I could jump in, that was to me where I thought the heart of the debate was. Like, if we both agree that there is this morality that we like God or Christianity, I think you would agree 98% on what your morality is and where it comes from. The question is, which system is best to get there? And I think Dave's compelling argument is the larger the government gets, the more culturally we go to this stuff. And Andrew's argument is, yeah, but we also are always going to see this stuff, which is why it's better to have a system of sort of Christian governance that would, through almost fiat, executive fiat, punish and diminish these sorts of things.
Which is why I've always said that we can move the Smiths of the world to the dark side because they necessarily see. And you know what, Dave? I think you would agree with this. It's when you have that first kid, right, that you start to see the cracks, right? You start to go, wait a second. Wait a second here. Maybe there is a system of oughts that we should adhere to, and maybe a little bit of going over that whole, non-aggression principle. Maybe we should. Maybe we should sometime. It's that first kid that does it. Am I wrong?
Well, no, I don't agree with I do agree with the spirit of what you're saying, not necessarily with the non-aggression principle. I think that, not your dude, to your point, I don't think there's anything more arbitrary or less arbitrary about it being, controlled by the government or being controlled by localities. I think that what I realized when I had that first kid was that, yes, there was something that mattered more than me and that mattered far outside of me. So it didn't, it didn't matter.
Real quick.
Have a good one. No, you got to go. Dude. I'm sorry, bro.
Dude, thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's get to Juxtapose 3. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What's up, dude?
Yep.
Great debate, by the way. Dave Smith, thank you for being so charitable and so good faith. It was nice to see that from the libertarian side. Apologies, I'm pretty sick. I'm crazy. But my question to you, Dave Smith, what, under your libertarian society, if we were to scale it on a societal level, okay, ideally, what safeguards would you implement against this degeneracy that you kind of conceded to that is kind of spreading out and kind of taking hold in society, which luckily you both agreed that is not a good thing. What safeguards would you put in place to suppress this? And more importantly, what would these safeguards be informed by? What would it be informed by? And then secondly, how could you enforce these safeguards without a foundational moral grounding, absent God? And then how do you implement these safeguards while not violating the NAP?
Sure. That's a really good question. So I think that in the same sense that Andrew, I'm sure you, because all I knew you from before this podcast was like your stuff on the
whatever
podcast. Yes. So I think one of the things that you probably would agree with about the state of young women in today's crazy society is that there aren't these, and there's something really sad about this that I don't think any of us necessarily love, but is just the reality of it, is that you kind of need these disaster stories to happen in order to provide an incentive for everybody else to not be a part of that. And like you could think about like what I'm trying to say is, so even if you think about like the law.
Yeah, I think I get it. Like social shaming, so that we can put these people up and show, don't be like this, essentially.
Sure. Like in the same sense that if somebody doesn't get health insurance and is like, I'm not going to pay for health insurance and I'm going to ride my motorcycle at fucking 90 miles an hour, and eventually they fuck themselves up real bad. Like, I'm not saying you don't want them to get taken care of, but there's also something where when they're an example that goes real bad, you go, that's why everyone else gets insurance, doesn't exceed the speed limit. You know what I mean? Like, and there's something about that where.
But that's like basic. That's basically all law. So all law is essentially tailored to the outlier, right? The outlier does something fucked up and ruins it for everybody else.
Sure, but I think that government, by its nature, tends to pervert these incentives. So it tends to say, hey, if you're a single mother, don't worry, we have a safety net for you. If you this, don't worry, we have a safety net for you.
I disagree. I think that government types, there's different government types. I think that in a full bird democracy, sure, that's what you're going to see, because that's what people are used to looking at due to the fact of sensationalism, media sensationalism. But I would equally put this burden on corporatism and NGOs.
Well, hold on,
going in. Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying government does this when it's democratic?
Yeah, I'm saying that I think that you could have perfect authoritarianism, at least in theory, where most of this type of stuff doesn't happen. Or you can have pure democracy where all of this stuff does happen. Or you could have perfect democracy where none of this stuff happens. And this is because I think that most of it revolves around the moral foundation of the people group who push these types of. In other words, I don't think necessarily any single type of government is more or less immoral. Rather, the people which prop the government up are more or less immoral.
So, okay, so I guess where we would maybe disagree is that I would argue that government, by its very nature, is taking from one group of people and giving to another.
It can be that way, yes.
No, I mean, I think that there's actually no other way it can be. That government, by its very nature, is taking from one group and giving to another
Then
group.
this is what humanity is demanding that they do then.
Perhaps. Sure.
And if it is what humanity is demanding, they have their own ownership of themselves to make the decision that that's what they want.
Well, that's a whole different claim. But I'm just saying that government, by its very nature, is taking from one group and giving to another. And by that very nature, they're taking from the group that is supposedly has something good and giving it to the group that has a not good. Like that's the very nature of it. And by doing that, they're disincentivizing being good and incentivizing being not good.
If you were a singular person who owned,
problem worse.
I don't think so. So here's my rebuttal. If you're a singular person who owned half of the land in the United States by yourself, you owned it. You, through machinations, were able to accrue enough wealth to do so. And all the people on that land had to live by your laws because it's your land. Are you saying that that's redistributive? That you said, no, of course not, right? So the thing is that if you're talking about monarchies where the land ownership is generally with one person, why indeed would that be problematic or redistributive? And that's a government.
Yes, but okay, we could get into that. That's a very interesting conversation. But whether you're saying that, you said two different things there. Whether it's a monarchy or whether it's a person who owns the land.
Same. What's the distinction?
Well, not exactly, but sure. But again, that is something we could have a 3-hour debate on. But
we should.
I would love to talk about that.
And I hate to kind of juxtapose real quick. Final word.
Yeah, final word. Just final thing for you, Dave Smith. If it could be proven to you somehow, because clearly libertarians have a huge issue with the size of government. If it could be proven to you that under a Christian church, Christian ethic, informed law and informed society, if it could be proven to you that this is better than your system as far as grounding the actual good and bad, which you would want as well, if it could be proven that they have the better claim to that, and they would not be affected by the size of government, would you then be forced to concede that it is a better system, and would you adhere to it, thus having the better results, the better outcomes, all the things that you want? They just happen to have God under that thing. Would you concede to that if it could be proven to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah,
fucking
sure.
epic. I love that. I love that.
I mean, but at the same time, I think either one of you guys should also answer that question in the opposite direction. Like, if it could be proven,
the answer is no. Even if it was
proven to you
that outcomes were better. Yeah.
No. If
Okay,
it could be proven to you, not just that outcomes are better, but that God was on the side of people who believed in small government and that it was a better outcome.
Well,
and
if you
God
could,
believed in
well,
that.
wait a second. If you could demonstrate that that was part of divine command, that would be different. But that wasn't really what was baked in, was whether it was part of divine command, but the outcome itself. So even if the outcome itself of like killing every third,
there was a little bit of both baked in there, but okay, sure.
Well, what he was baking in was saying, let's assume that I came to all of the Christian positions absent being a Christian, and we could demonstrate that the outcomes of that were better than libertarianism. Wouldn't you move towards that? That's what he's asking.
Okay, fine, but but same question to you in the same. If it was baked into the question that the Christian outcomes were better in limited government, would that make you someone who supported limited government?
No, outcomes themselves are not part of Christian ethics.
Okay,
that's part. I mean, well, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase.
Fine.
They're part of Christian ethics, but they're not the sum total of Christian ethics. Let me reframe so that we're clear. So the answer would be no. Ultimately, we would still have to adhere to what divine command is, even if we could demonstrate, for instance,
Okay,
if you murdered every second son, the outcomes for society were better, we still wouldn't do it.
If it would be demonstrated to you that the divine outcome or the divine intervention was that there should be limited government, and also that limited government would lead to more Christian outcomes, would you support limited government?
If anything that you said could be demonstrated as a divine command, then yes, we would follow that. If it could be demonstrated, sure.
Juxtaposed, thank you so much. I was just going to say real quick on that, because I know I've heard Andrew talk about this a lot, the idea of utilitarianism and outcomes, right? The real quick question I have for you, Andrew, is in a world of divine command Christian populism, would you think that all sins should be illegal?
No.
Given that, if you say sometimes there are sins that you would socially shame but not be illegal, could it not be true if it's proven through Dave's interpretation if the outcomes are best, because you're already...
And so this is where you might cede to like a threshold deontology, where you can say the duty always takes precedent unless the outcome is so horrific that you have to move the duty over.
Right.
But always the duty would still have to be within the framework of Christianity and Christian ethics. Yeah.
Okay, Spoons, can you hear us now?
Yes, finally.
Okay,
there we go. Your question. Okay, so that was rather contentious. I hope everyone's calmed down now. I'll keep this brief so I don't hold anyone else up. Let me try and steelman this conversation in a few sentences. I would say Dave's argument is that the government has eroded so much of society's social capability, and without its bureaucratic overreach, these former organs should, in theory, rejuvenate and carries society's social functions once again. And Andrew's argument is that the state, absent the organs of the church fully functioning, still need to exist to enforce morality, or else humans will essentially degrade into degeneracy and die. Very much the Juan Donoso Cortez argument. I would argue that if you're contemplating ways to reorganize society because you're in need of mitigating the overreach of immoral actors in the state, what you're dealing with really is a crisis of great men in society. So democracy is a natural, and so is the concept of picking people as members of the state. So saith Robert Filmer, which I'm sure Mr. Smith has read, and if he hasn't, he should, because then he can be a real libertarian and become a monarchist.
You're incorrect in one part of this. So I appreciated the steel man, but actually the heart of my argument was not just based around the idea that you need to have government enforcement in order to stop degeneracy, which I would agree is true to at least some extent. I think even Dave would. But rather the idea of self-ownership itself being the justification for not having a government which would enforce this. So that would be my one pushback towards you. And I think that that's key. And while me and Dave, at first, he kind of thought maybe this is pedantic, or maybe this guy is being bad faith or whatever, because he probably hasn't seen the pushback on that particular argument. I do think that it's a super important argument because it's a bottom line pillar. Yes. It's a pillar which supports this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that would be my one pushback to the steel man.
Yeah. It was kind of weird because I was trying to figure out what is Andrew actually trying to say. And then there was one point where you said, you basically want the social contract to be beyond just a social contract. Like it needs to be, I won't say reinforced, but backed up by a higher power.
Yeah, I think that it's necessary for us to have a moral society, and this is what Dave is alluding to as well. So he's saying when it comes to his moral oughts, he has to go to the divine, or he just doesn't have any. And this is my kind of problem with this idea of self-ownership institutionally anyway, and why I think that this kind of collapses on itself over and over again.
Yeah.
All right. Spoons, thank you so much. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Yeah. Hey, real cheers to you, Spoons. He is a friend of mine from, I don't know, some European shithole.
Yeah,
Who the fuck? And nobody cares about European shitholes, but anyway, next
Don't
call.
worry, we got another. Don't worry, the accents, we're saving them for the end, huh? So, all right, we got Grid Motorsports. Go ahead, Grid.
Hey, how are you guys?
What's up,
Very
Dave?
good. Dave, I really really appreciated your arguments, as ineffective as they were. It's tough. It's tough arguing with Andrew. I have just a couple of things, and I'll try to be as quick as I can. I was very curious. Do you consider our current government a failed republic?
Is that to Dave? The question's to Dave?
Yeah, to Dave. Do you consider our current government a failed republic?
Back your mouth away from the mic, by the way, Grid.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. It's a weird thing to listen to someone like this ask you a question with like a backhanded insult, like in front of it. Like, I liked your arguments, as ineffectual as they were, as he swallows his mic like it's a big dick. I don't know who are you, dude?
So you're just going to go straight to the ad hom and not answer the question?
No. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Okay, that's cool.
It's just a weird thing for someone like this to just throw down an insult and then ask a question as if I'm going to like really entertain it after that. Yeah. Okay. What else you got, buddy?
Anything else, Grid Motorsports?
I actually didn't think that was. I felt like I was being fairly nice. I guess I wasn't.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, Grid.
As ineffectual as your arguments were.
I thought you were quite handsome for an ugly man. So thanks. I'm just messing with you, man. Thanks for calling in.
But am I crazy that it's a weird way to just ask a question of somebody?
No,
I don't know. I always let that shit roll off. I mean, I do personally.
I guess I'm on your show in front of your audience, but I just didn't.
If you would like to answer the question,
no.
Okay.
I don't even remember what it was.
Are we a failed republic?
I mean, sure. Yeah, I guess.
I assume that he was going to have contention with the word republic, is my guess.
I mean, at one point, was the United States of America a republic? I think there's a strong argument for that. And are we a failed republic? I think we're a republic who became an empire, which is pretty common. And then it failed.
Okay. Next.
I don't know. Andrew, do you disagree with that, by the way? With like saying that we were a republic that became an empire?
Well, we were a republic that became a democracy.
Kind of similar though.
Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is similar, but kinda similar, it's a republic that allowed women like Rochelle to vote and fucked us all. It was
not women like me.
Women
not women like you.
and by the way, also women like the previous caller. He also got to vote.
Rochelle,
I had to eat the mic.
Okay,
maybe you're right, Andrew. I should have let that roll off my shoulders.
It's all right. It's all good. Rochelle, go ahead.
Okay, I want to introduce a framework that I've created. It's the 3 spheres of government. There's criminal, commercial, and social. And so criminal is violent crime, and there you're justified in throwing people in prison and using violent force to stop their criminal acts. And then there's commercial, which is going to be running the economy, the currency, banking, stopping fraud. And there, the punishment is fines, and if they don't comply, boycotts, blacklisting. And then everything else is in the social sphere, government. And they can't use violence against you, but they can.
You got to get to the question. What's the question?
So like, do you think that the government should come in and throw you in prison for smoking cigarettes?
No.
Okay, so you think it should be a social, well, maybe you don't, maybe you think it should be accepted, that a social sphere rule, that there should be social norms, and these can be organized. These can be like an actual organized government that you can be a citizen of, and if you don't follow the rules, they kick you out and you don't get benefits anymore.
Like a covenant community?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think there's this huge disconnect where you're not understanding that, like, yes, it can be wrong to do all of these things, but it's
yeah, but I don't
okay.
think this is wrong.
Well, I think it is. So
yeah, I know. But if you're just making the assertion of thing wrong, then I'll just make the assertion back thing not wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, then we can say the same thing when you say anything about any of the rules that
right,
you want to
which
make.
means it would come back down to force doctrine, which is the entire thing that is at the heart of our argument, which is around ownership. That's the whole point. So if you assert that smoking is wrong, and just assert that it's not wrong, and then the burden falls on you to tell me why it is wrong.
Well, it doesn't
force.
exactly. The burden doesn't exactly. Listen, I don't exactly agree with Rochelle, but the burden doesn't exactly fall back on anyone else. If anything, you've made it 50-50. So
sure.
If
So
anything, it's not that the burden falls back on someone else. It's that you just haven't proven your case any more than they.
We don't
case.
But we don't need to. If it's just a preference assertion, then it's just going to come down to force, right, Dave?
Well, yes, but
the
burden
then I'm right.
No, not at all. So the burden doesn't come back to the other person. You're not right in that. What you're right in is saying that. And by the way, I
if the
agree with
person
you.
says you shouldn't.
Huh?
If the person says that you should not do thing X, the other person says why, that is your burden.
Well,
no, not exactly.
It is.
It's okay. So you say someone shouldn't be gay.
Yeah, that would be my burden to make the demonstrable argument. Yeah,
and the same way that someone said to you, you shouldn't smoke, and then they say, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
So the burden falls to you. Why not?
No, the burden would fall to them. Why not?
Wait, the burden can't fall to them both times.
Yeah, it would fall to them both times. So if you ask me, why is homosexuality wrong? If I assert that it is, the burden's on me to demonstrate why it is. If you say smoking is wrong, and I say, why is smoking wrong? The burden falls on you.
Okay,
both
fine.
times.
It's a burden.
Wait, hold on. So the burden for homosexuality falls to the person doing it, right?
No, the burden would fall on the person saying you shouldn't do it.
So that's you. So what do you say to that?
I have several arguments against homosexuality. The first of which being it's a non-reproductive promotable activity, which is terrible for fucking society.
Smoking's bad too.
Can be, perhaps, but it does not promote.
By the way, I'm so pro.
It does not.
Smoking.
I would say that
For the
smoking.
record, I support smoking.
I would say, hang on. I would say that knowing that you're going to have a cigarette after you have sex leads to the reproductive activity of sex even more, Dave.
That's a weak argument.
Why are you laughing, Dave? You know it's great.
Listen, as I said at the beginning, I picked an argument I didn't believe in at all.
Fair enough.
Man, I think it's so lame that I vape and you smoke. You win.
It is fucking lame. Stop fucking vaping, dude. What the hell is wrong with you?
Rochelle. Rochelle, do you have a last comment? Because we got two more callers to get to, and we're running out of time. So last comment, real quick.
Because both put a burden on the healthcare system. Whether you're spreading STDs or you are getting lung cancer, you're putting a
why
burden
is that bad?
on the healthcare system.
Why is that
because bad? Because you're costing money for everybody who's paying in, and
why is that bad?
Because we want to live in a functional society where everything is super expensive.
So it's just down to your preferences. You want to live in a functional society.
No, she's got a better. Listen, Rochelle's not doing the best.
No, it's not a good argument. It's coming down to preferences, bro. No, it's not decent.
You're imposing your will on other people, and so there's an argument there. By the way,
it's preferential.
I'm not argue against smoking cigarettes. Smoking cigarettes is so goddamn cool. I wish.
But what are you fighting against here? All we've been able to do very quickly is reduce this down to preference. And if it's just preference, well, it's my preference to smoke. It's your preference to have this society. Those aren't good grounded foundations for an argument.
You just haven't. Sure, you can say that, but it's just, I don't know. Then you still haven't won the argument. At best, what you've done is tie.
I don't need to win the argument. If you say it's just a preference and I say it's a preference back, you haven't justified why I shouldn't do the thing. So therefore, I'll just continue to do the thing.
But
I don't need to. So it's not my burden. It's not my burden.
I think what Andrew said.
okay.
The extension of this argument, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, where you're going is this is why force doctrine is what's important, right? Because you need to persuade, you have to have some sort of backing, and you need to be able to persuade and be able to use force to stop Andrew, because otherwise it seems self-evident to us, like, well, yes, a workable healthcare system is good, but where do we ground our morality from? Well, Christian ethics or the ethics of God. If you don't have those ethics, at the end, your underpinning is going to be subjective in some way. And if you're
and so it's just going to come down to who can enforce whatever their preference is.
If the argument is that whoever can enforce their will be able to, sure.
Yeah. That's right, but that's what the argument of preference always comes down to. That's right. That's my whole argument.
Rochelle, we gotta get to next. Thanks so much.
No one's arguing that. That's clearly now, Andrew, Joe Biden and his administration can enforce their will on you.
That's right. But the thing is can they do it from a justified position or a preferential position?
But now, now you just moved back into a different territory. So can they justify it? Okay, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, but if it's not justified, it's a preference. Okay. And I don't think might makes right,
sure.
But you would agree with me that might makes.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's what I just said.
But you're making my argument for me. That's why we would reduce Rochelle down to, is this anything other than an axiomatic preference? If the answer is no, then why the fuck do I care? If you know, absent the force, what do I care?
All right, sure. We gotta get to Glenn. Yeah. He's actually smoking a cigar, so his opinion.
Yeah, I just want to say both of you guys are a bunch of bitches. Like vape, cigarette. Why don't you get a cigar, you guys? Cigar.
All right, fair enough.
Wait. I do smoke.
I know. Cigars. Shut up, Andrew. This is for the. Shut up.
Go ahead, Glenn, with your question.
One, I have a problem with Dave talking about us motorcycle riders driving really fast. Okay, don't ever do that again. I will find you.
Come find me, motherfucker.
Yeah.
So the argument seems to be more based on what Christian ethics versus libertarian. Like, what is a libertarian? A libertarian is just a conservative that likes drugs.
What?
All right.
Yeah, like every libertarian I know wants to promote shrooms and drugs and stuff like that.
Well, but why, Glenn? It's because they own themselves, right?
Yeah.
That's I think the heart of this.
I agree.
Oh, come on.
I agree.
I mean,
and what is the Christian who wants to ride a motorcycle and not do shrooms? Does he not own himself?
That's me.
That's me.
Okay, so do you not own yourself?
Yeah, I'm not sure that he does.
See, this is what's so stupid about this, is that someone wanting to do mushrooms is the same claim of self-ownership as someone not wanting to do mushrooms.
How?
Because your claim is that you own yourself, so you don't want to do it.
Listen, how about this? Glenn,
wait,
do you have it?
That doesn't logically follow, Dave.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. So
what does it logically follow?
If you say, well, nobody owns you and you don't own you, so you can do whatever the fuck you want, right? Because there's no ownership of anything, right? Then you can do mushrooms. However, if you make the claim that we ought to be able to do mushrooms without anybody enforcing their will on us, then that is making a different claim, which is that you ought not do this because it's bad because blank.
Okay, wait, hold on. So you're saying you ought to be able to do mushrooms but still not do them?
No, that's not what I said.
I thought that was what you said.
Let me explain it again. Assume that nobody owned anything. We're in fucking socialism utopia land, okay? There's no ownership of anybody. You can just do whatever the fuck you want. That doesn't actually prove you own yourself because you can do mushrooms. But if you say the reason you should be able to do mushrooms, absent somebody coming in and telling you you can't, right? That's a different claim. That's saying you ought not do that because you own yourself. So, you're actually conflating two different claims.
No, I don't think I am. So let's say you're in that socialist utopia and someone hands a bunch of mushrooms out to everybody and you go, I don't want to do these.
Yeah.
That could easily be construed as you saying, I own myself.
But what if they go, you're going to fucking do them. You're going to fucking do them whether you like it or not. I'm stuffing them down your mouth.
So you would be violating that person's
right. So now we have a second claim. So what's happening is the reason you have a non sequitur here is because you claim if nobody owns anything, then you can do whatever the fuck you want. But nobody disagrees that that is the case. It's only if you are making an ought, you can only do X because you own yourself. That's where we have a problem with the claim.
Well, no, I'm not saying you can only do X because you own yourself. I'm saying you should be able to do what you want to because you own
really?
yourself.
So then why can't I stuff the mushrooms down your mouth?
Because you don't own me.
Right, because you own yourself, and that's the claim.
Right. So what? I still
We're
am
asking
missing
why
your point.
ought I not stuff or make you do what I want?
No. That's not what I was ever asking. I was saying that the claim to say I don't want to do mushrooms is the same to claim I do. It's
not.
It's a claim of
okay.
So
So
it's
if
a different claim to say I'm going to force somebody else
yeah,
to.
Sure. But it's not an ought. And so what we're getting into is ought.
I wasn't even saying that. I'm just saying.
Listen,
okay.
Let me say this, Glenn. Thank you so much for the call. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.
I'm only cutting this off for this reason. I believe the next caller will have a lot to say on this very specific question because I know him and I know he's a big proponent of the non-aggression principle. So, Casimir, go ahead, sir, with your question.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hi,
Can you hear me
Kaz.
fine?
It's nice to see you, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Good.
I'll get right to the meat and potatoes. First, I heard the Caesar got mentioned. I think Caesar got his due from Brutus. I think Brutus gave Caesar his due.
Okay.
Sic semper tyrannis.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have some questions. I have some questions for Dave. Dave, do you agree that if I want to build a home for myself, I could use a tape measure? You know, one of these, right?
Sure.
Okay, seems weird. Now,
wait, what? That seems weird.
If I take this tape measure, yeah, I'll get. It's a good point. Trust me. And I measure a 2x4, and I know that the 2x4 is like 8 foot long. And then this bloody thing tells me, oh no, it's 12 foot. But I know I measured it with other tools. I know it's 8 foot long. But this thing tells me, no, you know, it ought to be 12 foot. Would that be a good tape measure?
I don't even understand what you're saying. The tape
I'd say that would be a bad tape measure.
The tape measure told you it ought to be.
If you knew that the piece of wood you had measured it by other means, and you had seen that it was X length, but then you took a tape measure to it, and you realized, well, wait, the tape measure is telling me it's a different length.
Sure.
The tape measure would be bad, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be like a useless one, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do we need the tape measure to tell me what ought to be the length? No, right? It should tell me what is the length.
Yeah.
Sure.
The description of reality. Okay. Now this is the I think this is the point I'm trying to make is that when we go into a legal system, we also don't need to tell us what we ought to do with it. It just tells us what is the crime. In fact, if my legal system were to tell me you ought to do this or you ought to do that, it would be like the tape measure telling me what the length should be. I don't need it to tell me what the length should be. I need to tell me the reality. Is it a crime in reality, descriptively or not? Is that not true? It's a question to both.
No. I mean, listen, I think that's a terrible point. And I think that would, even Andrew, I think would have to admit that by his own standards of morality, that would not be. So if the legal system were to tell you that it was a crime to get married and have kids, or that it was a crime to not torture your own kid.
Sure.
I'm sure there'd be I
would have moral objections.
That you could go.
Yeah.
That like I don't care what it tells me is the situation. That ought not be what I believe in. So no,
yeah,
I don't think that's a good point.
But
I agree, but there's an analogy breaker here. This tape measure is not just arbitrary like these examples. This is based on reality. The 2x4 is actually 8 foot long. This measures it. You know, I see the measurements. And I can measure it by other tools because it's connected to reality. This is not an arbitrary invention.
Right.
This is an invention that is based on observing reality and measuring it. So if a law, let's ask it differently. If there was a legal system that was based on objective reality, meaning it was an objective legal system, and what it gave you is a true or false result, whether something is a crime, would you want it to do anything else if you had that holy grail of law?
Yeah, again, I think actually Andrew's initial point that he was arguing with me takes out what you're saying here, is that, yeah, but you can't get from an is to an ought. So if you're talking about...
I'm not trying to get to an ought. I'm saying that the ought is bad when I'm talking about the system of law. What the system of law should tell me is what is a crime. It shouldn't tell me, oh, don't perform the crime because X reason. I don't care about that initially. Something else can tell me why I shouldn't perform a crime. For example, Christian ethics can tell me why I shouldn't be a criminal.
Sure.
Or I could be like a whim. I don't want to be a criminal.
Okay,
or
so
there could be some other reason, like argumentation ethics.
Okay, so the law is you can't believe in Jesus.
Well, that law would not be objective. It would not be like the tape measure.
Well, that's convenient, but okay, sure. So, but like,
Correct.
if
No,
that's
it's
the law,
not convenient.
no, but the law is objectively that you're not allowed to believe in Jesus.
So this is
I
like
can
an equivocation.
I can measure it, and that's what the law is.
That's an equivocation. So when I talk about law,
I don't understand. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm missing your point. So just ask me the question more straightforward.
Dave, what is a conflict?
What is a conflict?
Yes.
Okay, two views that don't align with each other.
No, in libertarian terms, it means a contradictory action. So there's
a different way of saying that, but sure.
Well, there's various equivocations, like different meanings can be assigned to the same word. But in libertarian terms, this is the assigned meaning, which is a conflict is contradictory actions. And from there, you can build a system where you define what could be like a system of resolving or avoiding conflicts. And then you come up with 3 possible options. You could have either libertarian law or objective law, which is you should avoid conflicts. You could have an answer that says the law of the jungle, you should not avoid conflicts, or you can do whatever you want.
Sure.
And then there could be some mixed law, which is what we're currently living under, which is, if it's one form of taxation, then it's theft. If it's another form, then it's not theft. That's mixed law, right? Now, all of those are reducible. They reduce to something. They reduce to either might makes right, or they're reduced to conflict avoidance. So that is an objective standard. If I can examine what you're doing and saying you're initiating conflict, I can call you a criminal. That's objectively true. I don't care whether it should be or shouldn't be.
Okay,
it's just
fair enough. I gotcha.
It's just that contrary. Let's say you say, well, what is why is that true? Well, because everything else resolves into just conflict. I don't care what you call a conflict initiation, right? You can call it gentle caress, or you can call it, essay, or you can call it whatever you want. It still falls under a different category from non-aggression, from not initiating conflicts. So that is an objective tape measure of law. That's the very foundation. Now you're saying something should or shouldn't.
Guys, you're gonna have to wrap this quick. You're gonna have to.
Okay,
we got 4
minutes.
minutes.
Time, but you gotta make it quick.
I'll wrap this quick. I think this was my main criticism of this debate. This debate is like asking, is the tape measure better than Christianity? Well, in what sense? If I want to build a home and I want to measure something, that the tape measure is better than, Christianity. But it's really a nonsensical question. Christianity is in a different category.
I tend to agree with you on that. I think that there's something about the morality of law and the question of what is right and wrong are in different categories. So I do agree with you on that.
It's like moral for me to, evict somebody who's starving to death. Legal, right? But it might be not moral according to some systems.
Yes, I agree with you on that. And at the same time, there's so many little nuances of that every single day where it might be the way that I just treated my wife this evening could be immoral or moral, but it's totally outside the realm of what's legal or illegal. Yeah, so I agree with that.
All right, Kaz. One last point real quick, then we got to let you go.
Sure. I want to shout out great contemporary libertarian jurists like Liquid Zulu, Stefan Kinsella, and Lucas Dominiak. And I hope that they listen, perhaps hear this, and join together in a podcast so you can actually observe contemporary libertarian jurists discuss questions of law, possibly separate from questions of morality, which are discussed quite often elsewhere. Thank you.
I appreciate it,
Thank
Kaz. Have a great evening, by the way. And here, Rob, if you don't mind, we did it. We got him right out
Midnight, yeah.
at the 3-hour marker. Sorry for everybody who super chats we couldn't read. I had to up it so that we could make sure we at least got to a few. I did tell Dave I'd get him out at the 3-hour marker, and damned if I'm not going to do just that.
You're just on time.
Just on time. Now, Dave Smith, who I really appreciate coming on, having this spirited debate. I hope to see you on the Crucible again. I'm usually sitting where Rob is, in fact, moderating these debates, but I'd be happy for you to use my platform in the future. I really enjoyed it. Take a minute, shout yourself out, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, I will just take this minute to thank you, Andrew, and you, Rob, for having me on, and I did enjoy it. It got off to a little bit of a heated start, but I did actually enjoy my time today. That was true. That was part of the fun too. So thank you guys for having me, and people can Comic Dave Smith and comicdavesmith.com and all that stuff. So
where are you at on Twitter?
Comic Dave Smith. That's
Comic
my
Dave
Twitter
Smith?
handle.
And then YouTube, any of those?
Part of the problem is my podcast, so people can go look that up if they're interested in what I have to say. But I really did enjoy spending the night with you guys. Thank you very much for having me, and I am definitely want to do more stuff in the future.
Of course, anytime. You ran the Crucible, and we always reciprocate. Thank you so much, Dave. You have yourself a wonderful night. robnoerr, real quick, go ahead and shout your channel out to everybody where they can find you as well.
Yeah, thanks. Normal America with robnoerr on YouTube. Just robnoerr as you see it spelled. All other platforms. Sorry I was having mic issues. This stupid computer. I need to get a new one. So if I get more people to come subscribe to me and watch my damn videos, maybe I'll get some shekels and, buy a new mic.
Get over there, subscribe to robnoerr. He never, ever does enough promotion for himself, enough shameless promotion. You can find him at Normal America on YouTube. Great blood sport debater, also was a fantastic moderator. I thought that he bridged the gap when we were kind of moving past each other multiple times. You did a great job. Rob, where can people find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it's just robnoerr, just like you see it there. So luckily, not the most common last name, so I was able to pick that up. So
great. All right, Rob, have yourself a great evening as well.
See ya.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hit it right at the 3-hour mark.
All right, everyone. What'd you think? I thought, man. So I'll tell you what my microphone issues are. Oh my gosh. I should have never streamed. That's the problem. The problem was that I streamed in the first place to my own channel. And here's what happens. For some reason that I can't figure out, when I'm doing 2 programs, my mic's going through 2 programs, it keeps diminishing itself to like 50%. So because I had StreamYards open up to moderate and I was on, that's what happens. So I do apologize for that. That's something that I have to figure out. But no, I enjoyed it. Look, I'll admit, I thought Andrew was contentious at first, but I also thought Dave wasn't understanding his point. And I thought Andrew was laying the groundwork for the debate. And that groundwork is, listen, if sort of your philosophy on how we should govern comes from the principle of the non-aggression principle, and the central to that is self-ownership, if you don't own yourself, and if you can't prove you own yourself, then who are you to say that we shouldn't look to things like morality that we believe in and have the government enforce that, right? Because why can't the government go in and say, no, you can't have incest? Why can't the government do that? And the argument would be because you have self-ownership. So the government doesn't have the right to do that. And that's the point that Andrew's trying to disprove, the concept of self-ownership. That's what the entire first 30, 35 minutes. Now, could have Andrew done it in a less contentious way? Maybe. But I understood what Andrew was doing. I feel like Andrew thought Dave was avoiding the question. I think it was more that Dave didn't understand what Andrew was getting to. And so that confusion led Andrew to being more contentious, which I think then Dave probably wasn't expecting that contentious of a conversation. It seemed to me like he thought it was going to be a debate, but like a conversation, and sort of a conversation, particularly because he reads Andrew's Twitter handle as Paleo Christian, and it's like, oh, you're a Paleo conservative. So yeah, like Buchanan and a libertarian would probably have a lot in common with a paleo-Christian or a paleo-conservative. So that's where I think the confusion was coming from. And I think once they settled in more, and I understand, like, oh, I spelled Andrew's name wrong on my video here. That's funny. I understand, like, Andrew does have this way of debating that sometimes comes across as semantics, and sometimes I think it's warranted. Other times I'm like, maybe a little nitpicky to try to win an argument. But I did think it was very warranted in this discussion. Maybe belabored the part a little too much, but I understood what was happening. And so that was just my take on it. You know, I thought Dave had good points and Andrew did. Like I said, the thrust of this, and as someone who considers myself sort of like, I don't know what term you'd use. People throw around the term minarchist. That's probably close to what I am. I believe in a very small government, but I'm not an ANCAP. So I fall somewhere in between of total libertarianism or Christian populism. You know, I think there was, if I was trying to bridge the gap and get some sort of agreement, I think both parties would agree in massively shrinking the size of the federal government. And regardless of government intervention, promoting the morality of Christianity. The details that the disagreements are, to me, are smaller than the agreement. And so to me, that was, you know, but that's no fun debate. Who the hell wants to sit around and hear people agreeing? So maybe if Andrew gets a chance to go on to Dave's podcast, maybe they'll talk more about the similarities they have, which I think there will be ample. I think if you were just sitting around with them at a bar drinking beer, you would find that probably they agree on a great many things, not just culturally, but also what the government should or should not do. I just think the foundational principles, those disagreements are real, and it does lead to details being different down the road. But I enjoyed it. Hopefully, I didn't get a lot of chance to talk to Dave by myself, but I would love to talk to Dave. I'll be honest with you, I don't mind sort of philosophical debates like this, but that's not really my forte. I'm more of a normative debater, talking about normative issues of today, and I like to get like a deep dive on those sort of things. So I'll do the philosophical debates, and I've debated Andrew very similarly to this topic in previous times. So, you know, I do them, but I would love to talk to Dave more about normative issues of the world today. But as it was, I thought both sides were good. I enjoyed it. You know, as far as my moderation, I apologize for the mic issues. I hesitate to get involved. I really do. But I thought like halfway through that debate, maybe if I just said a couple things, I could move it in a positive direction. So I hope that didn't come across as me trying to put words in either of the debaters' mouths. That's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying my best to maybe resolve some sorts of confusions or some areas we were getting stuck. So I hope that the audience didn't mind that, because to me, it wasn't about me. It was about them. Maybe so, Aircraft. That could be true. So, but anyways, yeah, next time you all see me is Wednesday. I'll probably be streaming Wednesday night. I don't know. I've been thinking, you know, it is Pride Month. So maybe I'll have a guest. Maybe I'll have a guest Wednesday. We don't know. I got to see when this debate is that I've lined up. Other than that, one of these days, I don't know. I'm feeling a little trans positive. Maybe we'll have a return of a guest or something. It could be good stuff. So we'll see what's up. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this. I thoroughly did, and I really want to thank Dave Smith and especially Andrew for giving me the opportunity to moderate. And Andrew was the reason I say especially Andrew. He reached out to me, so really appreciate it. Next time, I will not be streaming to my own channel, so I don't have those mic issues. So if I moderate again on the Crucible, I'll let you all know beforehand, and you can head over to the Crucible. I totally forgot about those mic issues, and then I got freaked out that if I like hit the wrong button or something, it would stop the stream for them. It would take me out of there, so I didn't want to hit any buttons that... Yeah, I'm a boomer. What can I say? All right, thanks so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the debate. Definitely enjoyed my moderation. We'll see you all Wednesday. As always, have a good one.